Sean todos y todas muy bienvenidos
Good
al inicio
afternoon,
de este
everybody,
foro
to the
internacional
initiation of the
donde vamos a estar
high-level
hablando sobre la
forum where we will
facilitación
be
e
talking about
implementación
facilitation and
actuales del
infrastructure
comercio electrónico
to
regional de
promote
Centroamérica.
electronic
Les saluda Katia Moreira de Centromipe.
trade
Les
regional
recordamos que este foro
for
tiene
the
fecha de inicio
MSMEs.
hoy.
This
También
regional
tendremos
forum
muchas
starts today. We should
actividades
also have
mañana,
many
21 de
activities
septiembre.
tomorrow,
Queremos
September
agradecer
21.
la
We'd like to
participación de
thank the
nuestro público más
participation
importante, que son las
of the
micro,
most
pequeñas
important
y
public, which
medianas
are the micro,
empresas
small, and medium
españoles trabajadores en
enterprise
la región
that work
centroamericana.
in the Central
Pero
American
también
region.
saludamos muy
Also greet
cordialmente a las
very
representaciones
cordially the
diplomáticas
diplomatic
tanto
representation
centroamericanas
both from
como
Central America
observadores
and
extrarregionales que
extra-regional
actualmente se están
observers who
conectando
are
a este
currently
foro,
connecting to this
como a
forum,
las representaciones de
as
organizaciones
well as
internacionales,
representation of
las
international
representaciones de
organization and
socios y
representation of
aliados
partners
estratégicos
and
que
strategic
acompañan la
partners
agenda de
that
trabajo de
accompany
las
the work
microempresas
agenda
en
of the
SICA. Y
MSME at
queremos
the SICA level.
extender de manera
We would also
particular
like
un
to
caluroso saludo
particularly
a los
extend
actores
a
globales
warm
del sector privado que
record
hoy se
of
conectan.
the private
Para dar
sector
inicio, me
organizations.
permito
To
presentar
start,
a
I
quienes forman parte de
can
nuestra mesa
introduce the
directiva.
members
En
who
primer
form part
lugar,
of our
saludamos a don Mario
main
Villalobos,
table.
director de
Mario
planificación
Villalobos,
de la
Planning
Secretaría
Director of the
General SICA,
General
quien
Secretariat of
actúa
SICA,
ahora en
who is
representación del secretario general
representing
del
the General
presidente Vargas.
Secretary, Mr. Werner
Saludamos
Vargas.
calurosamente
We also
en
greet
representación de uno de
in
nuestros socios
representative of one
estratégicos
of the
a
strategic
doña Lucy
partners,
Gilca,
Ms. Lucy
directora de la
Jilka,
Oficina de Políticas
Deputy
y
Director
Coordinación de
of
Entendimiento del
Office of
Foro de los
Public
Estados
Policy Planning
Unidos.
and Coordination of the
Asimismo,
United
me
States Bureau
permito
of the Western
presentar
Hemisphere Affairs at
a
United
don
States. And I
Jorge
also would
Morales
like to
Paulino,
introduce
presidente pro
Mr.
tempore
Jorge
de
Morales
Sempromipe
Paulino, pro
y
tempore president of
viceministro
Sempromipe,
ejecutivo
Vice
del
Minister
Ministerio de
of
Industria
Promotion,
y Comercio
MSME
de
of the
República Dominicana.
Industry and Trade
Para dar inicio a la
Ministry of
idea
Dominican
principal,
Republic. And to
vamos a
start this
escuchar las
inaugurational
palabras de
act, we will
bienvenida
hear the
de don
welcome
Mario
words
Villalobos
from
en
Mr. Mario
representación del
Villalobos in
secretario general de
representation of
SICA.
the Secretary General
Adelante,
of
don Mario.
SICA. Thank you, Don Mario.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very
Buenos días,
much and good
a
afternoon
todos y todas.
to each and everyone.
Honorable señor Jorge
Honorable
Morales,
Mr. Jorge
viceministro
Morales, Vice
a las
Minister
MIPIMES de República
of the
Dominicana,
promotion of the MSME
además
of Dominican
representante
Republic and
presidencial
representative of the pro tempore
Sempromipe,
presidency of
la honorable
Sempromipe.
señora Lucy
Honorable
Gilca,
Madam Lucy
secretaria de
Jelka of
Estado
the
de los Estados Unidos de
of
América,
Department of State of the
honorable
United States of America,
David
Honorable Mr. David Cabrera,
Silva,
Executive
interim de
Director
Sempromipe,
at interim of
estimados expertos,
Sempromipe, esteemed experts that will share with us
expostos
your
en cada
knowledge
uno de los puntos de agenda
on each one of the
incluidos en
points
este
on the
evento.
agenda included in this important
Distinguidos
event.
funcionarios
Distinguished
de SICA,
officials
miembros del
from the
SICA y
member
de la
countries of SICA
institucionalidad
and the regional
representantes,
institutionality that participate in this
invitados
meeting,
especiales que
special
nos
guests
acompañan
that
en
accompany
este
us
importante
in
evento.
this important
En
event.
nombre del señor
On
secretario
behalf
general
of
de
the
SICA, don
Secretary General
Isaac
of SICA, Mr.
Vargas
Werner
Torres, y
Isaac
todo su
Vargas
equipo de
Torres and
trabajo,
his whole work
tengo
team,
el honor
I have
de
the honor
darles la más
of
cordial bienvenida
welcoming
a
you
este
cordially to
importante
this
evento,
important
encuentro
event,
regional
the
sobre
regional
seguimiento,
high-level
promoción
forum,
e
facilitation
infraestructura
and
del
infrastructure to
comercio
promote
electrónico regional
electronic
de las
regional electronic
MIPIMES.
trade of the MSMEs.
Quiero comenzar mi intervención
I will
mencionando
start
lo
by
vital que
mentioning
resulta el concretar
how vital it
espacios
is to
como
concrete
los compartidos
spaces like
el
these
día de hoy.
that meets us
Es de
today.
todos conocido
It
que
is
la
of
urgencia
everybody,
de
known by
realizar
everybody,
nuevos
that the
ajustes
urgency on this issue,
nos obligó a
because of
transformar
COVID-19, obliged us
radicalmente
to
lo que
transform the way
tradicionalmente
how we
como sociedad en
traditionally,
su conjunto
as a society as a
nuestras
whole,
actividades.
were carrying out our activities.
Justamente hemos
Precisely,
descubierto la necesidad de transitar
and
algunas
to
actividades
transit
desde
some
el
of the
comercio
activities,
al plano
such as
digital,
trade, on
con
the
el
digital
objetivo de poder
area, in
adaptarse
order to
mejor a
adapt
esta nueva
in a
realidad.
better way in this
Nació
new
un
modality.
escenario
It
perfecto
also
de
presented the perfect
oportunidad
scenario
para los
of
países
opportunity so
miembros
that the
del
member
SICA
countries of SICA
aceleraran sus
would
esfuerzos
accelerate
en
their
la
efforts
transformación
in
digital de sus
transforming
digital transformation of the micro, small, and medium enterprise. Without a doubt, the MSME play a very important role of the economies of the SICA member countries as its broad representation in the fibers of the park makes up the main employment source and work for broad proportion of the population, especially the one that belongs to the most vulnerable sectors of society. Different to what is normally thought, the entrepreneurial part of the Sika region is represented by MSME for the most part. There is a entrepreneurial universe of approximately 1.58 million companies in the region, of which 99% are of a micro, small, and medium enterprise nature. These data reflect the importance of the MSME's entrepreneurial sector for the dynamics of production, trade, and national consumption and international consumption of the economies in the region, but also it invites us to reflect about the different challenges and strategic solutions to facilitate the support infrastructure that will promote regional electronic commerce. The digital technologies are transforming the way how the citizens interact and also the companies and the governments. The use of internet has increased significantly and the digital services start to displace more and more the traditional services. The time has shown the adoption of digital technologies perform a key role in the facilitation of transborder facilitation of merchandise, the reduction of trade costs, and the creation of new commercial opportunities. The digital economy gives way to new ways of generating value because it decreases the importance of physical infrastructure. It allows to increase the operational efficiency and uses electronic trade to connect buyers and sellers. These scenarios promote a very demanding environment. To take advantage of all of the potential of digitalization will require a vision and a long-term strategy that will allow to exchange experiences, promote partnerships, and adopt strategic decisions that will serve as a starting point for one roadmap that will strengthen the potential of electronic trade and the opening of digital markets for the MSMEs of the region. We, from the General Secretariat of SIG, will add efforts in search of synergies and complementarities to strengthen the key elements and enabling development of electronic trade. From our coordinator, we will try to promote modernization of SICA, strengthening and prioritizing digital transformation at the institutional and regional levels. I would like to highlight the important role that international cooperation plays in these processes, and I would like to transfer or give my most important appreciation to the Department of State of the United States for its support to the MSM online projects, and of course, all of the efforts derived from this. We invite you so that this relation of cordiality can continue in time so that we can continue to concreting positive outcomes for these Central Americans. I take advantage of this space to congratulate Sempromipe, David and his work team for the organization of this important event. From the Secretariat, General Secretariat, we want to wish you a very productive development of the agenda, and we reiterate our best wishes so that this important forum can fulfill the proposed objectives. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Don Mario Villalobos, for these inspiring words. We will now listen to the welcome words of Ms. Lucy Jilka in representation of our strategic partner, the Department of State of the United States.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for being here today. And thank you especially to Sempermite team for its continued leadership and efforts to promote e-commerce in Central America over the last several years. Through our e-commerce capacity building initiative with Sempermite to date, the project has supported intensive training on e-commerce readiness for over 350 micro, small, and medium enterprises in 5 countries. This is really amazing work. It has also supported training and capacity building for over 30 business development service providers in the region. It has developed and released an open access, comprehensive e-commerce training curriculum for service providers to continue providing education on e-commerce for micro, small, and medium enterprises for the region. Again, really outstanding work. Through this initiative, Sempermipe has also worked with relevant stakeholders to develop national e-commerce plans in 3 countries. We hope that that is only the beginning. The forum that launches today will give stakeholders the opportunity to work collectively to identify opportunities to use e-commerce and to promote digital transformation to better equip micro, small, and medium enterprises to face the current economic challenges and to accelerate economic growth. We will work together to identify regional solutions to global challenges and to develop a robust regional agenda that promotes digital markets in the region for the benefit of micro, small, and medium enterprises. I want to thank everyone who is joining us here today in the public, the private, and the academic sectors. You have all contributed throughout the development of this valuable initiative, and your continued engagement is imperative as we work together to take the next steps to improve access to the digital marketplace for all. It is a pleasure being here today, and thank you for your efforts and the important work that you do to advance our shared priority of continued economic growth for the region. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, doña Lucy, por esas palabras que nos impulsan a continuar para
Thank you very
trabajar.
much, Mrs. Lucy, and for your warm words that will allow us to continue working on commercial, on electronic commerce, and to continue, we shall hear Mr. Jorge Morales Paulino, Vice Minister of Promotion of MSME of Dominican Republic and pro tempore Presidency of Central America, of Sempromipe. Good afternoon, everybody. Mario, it's nighttime here, and it's quite late in the evening. He is currently in Vienna. It's about 8 o'clock night.
Doña Lucy, Gilka,
Madam Lucy
gracias
Jilka,
por
thank
esa,
you so much. A
gran
warm
alianza
greeting and
que
this
lideró
great partnership from the United States that
SICA
we're
y
embracing
Sempromipe.
from SICA and Sempromipe.
Para nosotros tiene
For
mucho valor
us,
esas
it is
palabras
very
y ese hecho de
valuable
que
the words that you
están
have
dispuestos a
said,
seguir
that you're willing to
fortalezando
continue, and the Department of State of the United
el
States is
crecimiento y la formación
willing to continue with
digital de
growth
las
and
empresas micro
education on the
y
digital
pequeñas
arena
que
for the
siguen
MSME, and it
esa labor
makes us
de
very,
don Mario
we're
desde la
filled with
Secretaría
satisfaction and the great work
Secretarial
that Mario is doing from the General
hemos
Secretariat of SIC and
recibido
the great support that we have
de
received
su
from
titan
David,
en
who is a
Centromipe.
titan in Centromipe.
Aquí casualmente estamos debatiendo
Here,
en estos momentos
we are precisely
eh,
debating
lo que es la fuente de
the
financiamiento para
source of
las MIPIMES
funding
en el
for the
mundo.
micro, small, and
Y
medium
casualmente
enterprise
eso es lo
around
que
the
estamos
world. And
discutiendo hoy.
precisely we were talking about or debating about CAD
Los
Chapter
conocidos intereses
128,
relativos a
and
todo lo que son las
which
fuentes de
is relative to
financiamiento
all the funding
para las
sources for
MIPIMES de
the
una forma real y
so
efectiva,
that the
sin,
MSME
sin
can
trampa.
access
Y uno de los
without a
puntos
trauma
fundamentales
for
que,
funding. One of the fundamental
que
points
se ha
precisely
identificado
that has been
como una de las
identified
fuentes
as one of
relevantes
the new
de
sources of
financiamiento es
funding is
precisamente
precisely
el crédito digital como
digital
forma de
credits
negocio
and
de
the way
inversión
of
para las
making
empresas
business
MIPYME.
in a digital way for the MSMEs.
Indiscutiblemente las pandemias
Undoubtedly, the
aceleraron
pandemic
eso, no
came to
todo fue
accelerate the
negativo, al
process. Not
contrario.
everything was negative during the
Hay que
pandemic.
saber que
We have to
esta
know
pandemia
that
nosotros
without
no
this
hubiéramos
pandemic, we
logrado
would not
el
have been
salto acelerado
achieved
que
to
tuvimos que dar
jump
para
so
incorporar a las
fast
MIPYME a
to
su mundo
incorporate the
electrónico
micro, small, and medium
con
enterprise to an
muchísima
electronic world, to make business
transacción.
online, to make
Eh,
transactions
qué
online.
bueno,
And
qué bueno
how
que esa
fantastic
parte
that
buena
this
ha
part,
quedado del
this good
sobre
part,
y qué
stayed.
bueno tener un
And
aliado
how
tan
good
importante
to
para
have such an
nosotros
important partner
y a
for
todos
us
los
and
latinoamericanos
for all the Latin
de ese gran
Americans
mundo que
of
es
this
ese
big
gigante
world, which is
hermano
this
mayor de los
the
Estados Unidos en
older
materia de
brother of
tratado.
which is the
Qué
United
bueno es
States
tener
Department
a
of State.
funcionarios como
How
doña
wonderful to
Lucy
have
que
officials like
brillan
Madame Lucy
por su
who
empeño,
shine
dedicación y
because of their
hacer
dedication
que las
and their
empresas
work
MIPYME
so that the
puedan desarrollar
MSME businesses can
todas las
develop
herramientas
and can have
digitales
all
para
the
desarrollarse.
digital tools
Estados
at
Unidos
their
es
hands. And the
el
United
ejemplo del
States,
mundo
which is such an example of the
digital
world of the
que
digital
exporta las principales
advancement,
empresas
which
digitales del mundo de
has the
manera
main digital
para
companies
nosotros
around the world. For us,
es un gran honor poder
it is a
tener
great honor
tan
to be able
valioso
to
y
have such
amplio
valuable
conocimiento.
support because of
Las
broad
empresas MIPYME de hoy
knowledge.
en día
The
no se pueden
MSME
dejar atrás
businesses
y
nowadays, we
queremos que se
cannot leave them
desarrollen
behind. We want them to become developed. We have to digitalize them. We need
y
to
este
have
programa
them
nos va a ayudar
make business online. And at the
es
same
una
time, they
gran
will become
responsabilidad
formalized. This is
y
great
tarea
work and a
y qué
great
bueno que
task.
hemos
And
logrado
how good that we have been able to,
lograr
in these
capacitar
last 4 years,
50
train
profesionales. Estamos con
150
una relación
professionals, and we count with
público-empresarial
25 allied or partner companies, a public-private partnership that are
Nosotros
25 of
continuaremos
them. We
desarrollando
will
esta gran
continue
labor.
developing this great
Confiamos y
work
apostamos en
because
las
we
empresas
trust and we
MIPYME
bet
como
for
uno de los
the
principales
MSME
impulsores
businesses as one of the
no
development
solamente de la región, sino de toda
points,
América
not only of the
Latina.
region, but also of Latin America.
Lo necesita con urgencia Latinoamérica
Latin
y
America
necesita
so
ya
urgently needs to shake off
de estas trabas que habían impuesto, estas
these
barreras que habían
these
puesto para
barriers that
acceder
had
al
not allowed
conocimiento
them to
digital.
access the digital
Ya
knowledge.
con los amplios conocimientos
With
de
the broad
Estados Unidos y
knowledge
su
from the
Departamento
United
de
States
Estado,
and its Department
nosotros
of State,
podemos decir que
we can say
y este
that
foro que abrimos hoy
we are ready. And the forum that
precisamente
opens up today
viene
precisely
a apuntar
comes
en
to
ese gran
help
aliado y amigo que nosotros
this
necesitamos y que nosotros
together with this
recibimos
great
con
friend.
beneplácito. Así que
And we receive with
éxito.
so happily so
Aquí seguiremos
success.
trabajando.
Congratulations.
Esto es, como le dije, es un capítulo
As I
bastante
said,
grande.
this is a
Estamos conociendo
rather
una gente
broad chapter that
que
we
ha
are
estado
knowing
aquí en
about. This
Vienna
is a rather
y que esperamos
uh,
culminar con mucho
tight
éxito
agenda here in
el
Vienna,
día
and
de
we
hoy.
expect to conclude
Pero
it with great
le
success by
decimos
Friday.
que
But we want to say the digital tool is a role. It's not that it's a need, but it is absolutely impressible, important for the development of the MSME in the end, online business, from the education of the business and the management and connectivity. Everything is already an obligation for the micro, small, and medium enterprise. And we thank you so much to receiving that enormous support from the U.S. Department of State. And thank you, Don Mario, uh, and thank you, David Cabrera.
Muchísimas gracias, don Jorge Paulino, por sus valiosas palabras. Agradecemos a la mesa de honor y damos por inaugurado este foro de alto nivel. Y para aprovechar el tiempo máximo, vamos a continuar con el siguiente espacio. Damos la bienvenida y abrimos la ponencia, datos y elementos para conocer la situación del comercio electrónico de la región centroamericana, presentada por el señor David Cabrera, director ejecutivo de Sempromipe, y Katy Suominen, gerente general de Next Trade Group y experta global en comercio electrónico. Cedo la palabra al señor Cabrera.
Muchísimas gracias, Katia. ¿Se me escucha bien y se ve la presentación? Solo que me confirmes.
Se escucha perfectamente y te ves bien.
Sí, David.
Muchas gracias. Un cordial saludo a todas y todos los que están presentes en este inicio del foro. Un cordial saludo a Miss Gilka, al doctor Morales, presidente pro tempore de Sempromipe, y un especial saludo a don Mario Villalobos de la Secretaría General. La verdad es que este foro culmina un trabajo de un proyecto que lideramos desde Sempromipe desde el año 2018 y que, sin saberlo, pues la pandemia ha venido a acelerar procesos que se supone que en términos de comercio electrónico, digitalización, adaptación tecnológica, estaban previstos para dentro de 10 años. La pandemia en un año nos ha traído 10 años de desarrollo en términos de comercio electrónico y de digitalización y de establecer mercados digitales sólidos de 10 años para acá. Y el proyecto Mi Pymes en línea, para los que no estén familiarizados con él, pues obviamente viene con el apoyo del gobierno de Estados Unidos y busca que las micro, pequeñas y medianas empresas de la región del SICA utilicen sus plataformas de comercio electrónico como un mecanismo de estratégico para aumentar sus ventas, mejorar su relación con clientes y proveedores y llegar a nuevos mercados nacionales, regionales e internacionales. Y la génesis de todo el trabajo que se ha ido impulsando desde el año 2018 hasta la fecha ha estado centrado en tres componentes principales de este programa, ¿no? Hemos estado trabajando en mejorar el marco de política pública, buscando armonizar desde una perspectiva regional alianzas público-privadas y con academia, el análisis de hojas de rutas desde el punto de vista de incidencia de política para el acceso a la MIPYME y establecer un continuo diálogo regional público-privado para precisamente utilizar el comercio electrónico como uno de los canales que en este tiempo ha sido vital para el proceso de recuperación económica de la región. Hemos trabajado también fuertemente y seguimos trabajando en fortalecer el ecosistema regional. Este foro es una muestra donde muchas de nuestras instituciones hermanas del subsistema económico, que son nuestros aliados en temas de facilitación del comercio y en infraestructura para el comercio electrónico, tienen mucho que contar en cuanto a muchas de las iniciativas que han desarrollado y que tienen puesto a disposición de la región para facilitar un mercado común centroamericano digital. Evidentemente, el desarrollo de estrategias, como decía Mirjilka, y de planes de trabajo en agendas nacionales que impulsen precisamente el desarrollo a nivel nacional de iniciativas que permitan agilizar los procesos de comercialización de los productos de las micro, pequeñas y medianas empresas de la región a través del comercio electrónico. Y nos hemos enfocado muy fuertemente a desarrollar capacidades en las micro, pequeñas y
We have
medianas
focused in the
adaptándonos
micro and medium companies, adapting to the needs of each one of them, depending on the phase in their development, looking for upscaling, as Dr. Vargas was saying, with more than 25 institutions, public, private institutions, who scale this model and count on institutions to continue promoting this technical trainings so that there is a latent sustainability of the model, and also where there has been a comprehensive support, not only with training, but also technical support to work with plans to adapt and micro lines, funding lines for SMEs that promote these adaptation process, adaptation to e-commerce. So for us, there are three important areas that need to be continued. On one side, visibility and sensitization, awareness, that is to sensitize the SMEs and consumers, and that has to do with us, the institutions that are responsible to sensitize or make aware other actors on this. And on the other hand, the exchange and learnings are very important that we have had during this time that will continue helping and nourishing us. Therefore, these spaces are very important. And also monitoring and evaluation and assessment, and to get the results have impact in SMEs in the region, promoting productive improvement of our businesses, of our companies, to improve also the life conditions of people in Central America. At the end, it is important to visualize that the environment of e-commerce is changing the way of doing business in the region. Just take a look at these figures of how e-commerce is moving the economy according to the Euromonitor. Last year, it was more than $3 million that were sold through e-commerce, and this is going to double in almost 3 years of time. And also other areas have become involved in e-commerce, other areas that didn't work with e-commerce prior to this. All other sectors have potentiated, sectors that have to do with consumption good, handicrafts, and food, things that was unthinkable in terms of doing this online and bring this to your home, for example, supermarket. And as Mario was saying, you can see on this chart how the efforts have changed and how the physical store is being changed or replaced by the e-store. You can see on the chart the evolution, the points where we were at the beginning of the pandemic, and you can see the growth that has been spectacular. And this has been important. And displacement to e-commerce. It's important to consider that the consumer has the final word in this process. The trends that you can see marked by the e-commerce and the demands by the consumers are through the e-commerce are very clear, the demands of the consumer, and therefore the region has to adapt the way they are doing business precisely based on what the consumer on the demand is requiring. You can see on screen the potential of free delivery of the products, and that go precisely to ability to pay with cash on delivery, different ways that were not normally used in the region before. On the other hand, as I was saying, new sectors like supermarkets and have also come to stay, and in another way of how business is being done. You can see this graph from Central America. You can see that as per the end of 2021, you can see a marked increase of sales of first aid products through e-commerce. You can see the growth that practically grew from 0 in 2019 to what we have now in 2021 is continuing. That's why we can say, and you can see that on this slide, growth has been spectacular. For example, in Costa Rica, with more than 41.2% growth, and also figures are very clear, as more than 2 million homes are doing their purchases through the internet. And then this has led us to think that the project marks the need of having these areas as a pillar for growth. On one side, to have a regulatory framework for digital businesses, that is to have entities that can visualize regional strategies to modify those regulatory frameworks where we can work with agencies that promote exports, also SMEs attention centers, industry chambers, commerce chambers, are the ones that are going to be using also promoting those channels. And that includes also professional training institutes will allow us also to educate and train all the actors involved in this. Also, the development of capacity for e-commerce. That means working with the Secretary of Innovation, Telecommunications, Superintendencies, Ministries of Science and Technology, precisely to support that technological development. And as Dr. Morales was saying, also access to funding and online payment with our online customers, and that includes working together with our allies like Ministries of Economy, Commerce, also with the Ministry of Finances in the region to change the certain aspects, as well as working with other directorates like the Consumer Protection and the Ministry of Science. For that, infrastructure and connectivity are very important. We also have the intervention of the Central American Telecommunication Committee that we need to consider to establish a framework for a common market in the Central America. One of the most important aspects where we have the most important aspect playing an important role is logistics and business facilitation, where we work with the ministries of economy with important leadership to make use of the integration processes in the region, better use of this integration between Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, which is vital in these processes. It has to be an integrative
process. We also need to focus on three main areas that have uh, been brought by the SMEs in the region. One is the access to funding, which is clear, and this is our secretary is precisely at this moment during an event at the global level talking about these aspects. Then number two, we have export logistics that contribute to entrepreneurships, and also number three, the use of digital marketing, which is one of the challenges that we have with the regional SMEs, where we need to promote the necessary tools so that our small businesses can scale up and use one of the important marketplaces at the Latin American level and also international level. I would like to conclude that we need to work with seven important aspects. Um, the four wants to allow us to have these conversations to talk about the guidelines and a common roadmap for the Central American integration. That means work on the regulatory framework for the businesses, topics like logistics for e-commerce, also promote new initiatives for online payments, establish digital regulations that are more concrete, that are adapted to these new times, that go in hand with the new latest developments. Also, the capacity of businesses for e-commerce and having e-commerce channels is one of the main pillars for their strategic plannings. And also commercial topics about connectivity that is very important. We have um, realized now that we are seeing rural SMEs that there is a clear gap that we need to address in the rural sector. This in regard to connectivity so that e-commerce can take place and can be promoted from the inside of countries. And obviously also access to financial resources. Also look for new initiatives that have an answer, provide an answer to the needs of the companies. I'd like to comment this, and obviously, I'd like also to have the floor to Kati Sumin, who is the general manager of global trade, who is a specialist at the global level on e-commerce, and she has helped us a lot precisely to generate synergies and on many of the processes that we have going on, and also to provide scientific evidence for the decision-making process. So please, Kathy, the floor is all yours so that you can let us know what you have prepared that allows us to do this comparison between the pre-pandemic level and also the post-pandemic um, uh, situation. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, David. Do you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you. Well, thank you for this space, allowing me to come to you also for the excellent collaboration. It has been 3 years that we have been working. We thank very much for the collaboration with Sempromite, with all the functionaries here, and also the Department of State. So we are thankful for this space, and I'm going to present a little on what going on what David was mentioning. Like to present to you about where the SMEs are in terms of e-commerce and where we are heading to. So today, what we see, and we have taken out this data from the last 2 months, and we are using digital uh, tools and digital channels, and we can see that SMEs is almost to 60% buying and purchasing online in some way, and also certain companies are very much integrated into the digital economy. And of course, SMEs are still using basic tools like social networks, Facebook, Instagram, and use of marketplaces like Amazon and so on are not that broadly used, but that would allow us to scale up their sales. But the bigger are integrated in these global channels. And I hope that we can SMEs can increase their presence, their online presence. And compared to 2019, this has increased in 15% the use of the digital channels on behalf of SMEs. So we have seen a digital revolution in the area, and also SMEs have received certain benefits from this. Working more than 60% have reported an increase in the number of customers that they have, and also half of them have increased their annual sales. Also, big companies have been able to have access to e-commerce markets, but also 20-25% of SMEs have used e-commerce to go into international markets. Also, e-commerce has been really a very important tool for the SMEs to increase their sales, increase their exports, and also hire local services and create more employment in the Central American countries. SMEs also sees the benefits and they want to invest more in the coming year. Almost 50% want to invest up to $5,000 and even more. And so this is really an engine for the growth of the SMEs, and they are already looking on that direction. Consumers also in Central America, you can see all of us here at this forum are already buying more online. And I would say like 25% of each Italian group are probably buying double of it or more, twice, and all of them are increasing their online sales and using also global platforms like Amazon, but also local stores, which is fantastic to see that many local sales in the region or purchases in the region are made digitally. There is something very nice that we can see on the data is that commerce are exporting also. That means that they are integrated at the global level so that we can see SMEs that don't have online sales, but they do exports. And we can see here that certain smallest enterprise are selling online also and are exporting. And those companies that are selling online are exporting to certain markets. They are more diversified in terms of their sales. That means that e-commerce is allowing the companies to expand their sales, their markets, diversifying their exports. But there are challenges we asked the SMEs where the most of the challenges are. To grow online sales, and it has to do. The challenges have to do a lot with digital marketing, with funding, with the logistical aspects. So that they need more capacity to maintain their stores online, maintain their presence in e-commerce platforms, and also have access to capital to continue in this digital road and acquire more capacity. Still lots to do in the region. It's you can see that all countries have similar needs. We can rank them here, all the needs, and you can see they are very similar. among the different countries. There is a regional agenda where we can prioritize our interventions to help SMEs to pass those barriers and grow their online sales. And also, what do SMEs need? Which are their most urgent needs? They need to grow their capacities for digital marketing, as David mentioned, and also their online presence, as well as to analyze the data of their customers and visitors to their stores, which is good to acknowledge that opportunity that exists to be able to get to know their customers more, and also then comply with the guidelines for the access to the market. So that means that priorities are pretty clear. They have to do with logistics, with SME funding, and that's why we're here in this for trying to solve together and increase the use of the digital networks that will allow to increase the sales of SMEs. As you can see here, they are not still used to its full potential. We can see there are aspects like customer relations or store visitor analysis, all these type of things. There's still a room to increase these figures through the work of Sempromic and other agencies that are present here. So for me, continuing on the line of this journey that we still have to make, to continue with this, maybe we have like five groups of companies. We have companies that are not digitalized at this moment. David is working with them at this moment. We also have a social sellers, and we also would like the SMEs to accelerate their digital journeys along this road, because when they arrive here to this level, they are very much digitalized. They have a stronger growth and export more than those small businesses here. So our task is to accelerate and facilitate so that SMEs can use the digital channels to grow. And how will we do that? I would say through a digital transformation that is continuous, and also through a better environment for e-commerce in the region. So this is, I would say, the overview for 2022. I hope that we will be better off by 2025, that we achieve good results using this web forum to how to grow in this. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cabrera, Mr. Suminen, for contextualizing the progress of SMEs in the Central American toxins. We have some questions that we would like our executive director to please answer. They are asking us if these data are specific for Central America and if they are going to have access to this document. So I'll give now the floor to Mr. David Cabrera. Can you hear me, Katia? I hear you perfectly well, David. Well, this is data from Central America. As a matter of fact, there is a study available, a pre-pandemic study, and this data that has been shown by Katy today, we have just finished editing them. So she has just given us like a broad inform us broadly about this. We will be sharing this and we will be publishing this in brief so that you can have access and use this. Thank you, David. And also we have a question here. Mr. Eric Cha is asking where are these national plans? Have you considered making use of the data and creation of predictive models to provide logistic services that are quicker. We have Katy Somimen here with us, luckily, who accompanied Sempromipe on this plan so that she can answer to this. Well, this is an excellent question, and I think that the plans that we have, including with El Salvador, have been based on the data that we had from 2020 and 2021. So for us, it has been a development based on data, on information. So it would be excellent to predict based on the data that we have, predict the solutions that would be optimal for the development of a digital market. So I think that the next generation of solutions that Eric is proposing is very timely and vital to have this solution search based on predictive data to look for optimum solutions. What we have is lots of international examples that have worked where we have included in the national plans. So there's a lot of experience at the global level that can help, where we can learn, where Central America can learn a lot, like in this forum. Thank you.
Bien, muchísimas gracias, señor Cabrera, señora Suminin, por este espacio tan
Mr.
enriquecedor.
Cabrera,
Y en función del tiempo,
Ms. Sumina, thank you so much for the space and in honor of time to take advantage. We shall make way for the conversation, the logistics for digital trade. And this session, we will be addressing the transboundary trade and logistics that is perceived as one of the main challenges so that the companies can adopt electronic trade and take advantage of the rise of digital technology. And to address this topic and to work on digital trade, good practices of trade facilitation and innovation and logistic transboundary logistics services were accompanied today by global actors, experts of the private sector. This part of the conversation, we shall have the participation of Maria Moises, Vice President of Public Affairs, Global Affairs of FedEx, and Fernanda Ho, Regulation of DHL America, and is also invited the Director of Governmental Issues for Latin America and the Caribbean for FedEx, who still hasn't been able to connect because of personal issues, but we shall be welcoming him aboard as soon as he is able to enter into the conversation. And to moderate, we give the welcome to Gabriela Montenegro, and I would like to introduce her. She's founder of Prospera Consortium and Economic Development and Trade Facilitation, Digital Economy, and Leadership. She has led key initiatives for institutional strengthening and improving of business climate and business of the SICA region, has participated in several studies on topics for trade facilitation. She has worked intensely in the Central American region, Caribbean, United States, and Southeast Asia. I give the floor and welcome Gabriela Montenegro. Thank you very much, Katia. As always, it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to talk about the factors and the area that allows the growth of the MSMEs. And I admire Sempromipe because it's placing this topic as in a leadership role from the perspective of the MSME. In the case of trade facilitation and logistics, it's not always there. And I'm very enthusiastic about this opportunity to speak in this forum with such distinguished expert leaders in Latin America for the logistics department and support all of these electronic trade areas to address this area and the future of digital trade, good practices of trade facilitation, logistical services, transboundary logistical services were accompanied today. And please turn on your cameras, Miss Maria Fernanda Fonte. She is Vice President of Customs Issues and Regulation Issues for the Americas of DHL Express. She is responsible of the regulatory issues, and Maria Fernandez has a lot of experience working with DHL, and previously uh, she was in compliance issues in Latin America, and she has a doc and PhD in law from the University of Miami and has graduated also from the University of the Andes from Bogota. We also for
entre
Latin
otros
American and
foros de
Caribbean,
diálogo
among other
público-privado.
dialect forums,
Ha liderado
public-private dialect
importantes
forums.
iniciativas para
He has
respuesta de crisis y
several
emergencias como
important
la distribución de
initiatives,
vacunas durante
such as
COVID-19. Y
vaccines
el
for
señor Díaz cursó la
COVID-19,
carrera
and
de
Mr.
Ciencias
Diaz
Políticas y Relaciones
studied
Internacionales en la Universidad Internacional de
law
la
and
Florida y tiene un
international
doctorado
affairs. The
en leyes
University
de
of
la
the
Universidad de
Florida
Miami.
has a PhD in
Y
law.
muy importante
And
también,
very
María
important
Luisa
also,
Boyce. María Luisa,
Maria
¿estás conectada
Luisa
también?
Voice, are you connected also?
Sí, aquí estoy.
Here I am.
Con
Y la
mucho
cámara
gusto, María
prendida.
Luisa,
And my
gracias.
camera is
María
on.
Luisa es
Maria
vicepresidenta de
Luisa is
Asuntos
Vice
Públicos
President of
Globales
Public
de UPS.
Global Published Affairs of
Ella
UPAs
también tiene
and
más de 25 años de experiencia y
has more
liderazgo en comercio
25 years
internacional,
of experience in
asuntos aduaneros
international
y comercio
trade and
transfronterizo.
customs issues and
Lidera y
transboundary
participa muy
trade, and leads
activamente
and
en diversas
very
iniciativas que fomentan el comercio
participates
electrónico,
very actively in
como el programa de mujeres
electronic commerce
exportadoras de UPS,
and
el
the
Comité de
exporters of
Facilitación de
UPS,
Comercio de
Trade
American Business
Facilitation,
Dialogue.
American Business Dialogue,
También forma parte de la
and also
Alianza
forms
para
part of the
el Desarrollo del Comercio,
Partnership
el Trade
for Trade
Development,
Development,
y es
and
presidenta del
is
Comité de
president of
Ecopolíticas
the
de Seguridad de la
Eco
Cadena Logística para la
Security and
Asociación
Safety
Americana de
Politics,
Transportistas.
Ecotourism for the American
María Luisa es
Association of
licenciada en
Transport, and
Finanzas y
Maria Luisa
Relaciones Internacionales de la
has a
Universidad
degree in
Externado de Colombia.
finance and went
Bueno, como ven ustedes, tenemos aquí
university.
un
As you can
gran
see, we have
panel de expertos que
a
tenemos que
panel of
aprovechar al
experts, and
máximo
we have to
durante los
take
siguientes
advantage
45
to its
minutos
utmost
y
for the next 45 minutes.
creo que
And
partimos de un excelente contexto
we
que nos
start
ha
in an
planteado
excellent
David Cabrera,
context,
el director
which David
ejecutivo de
Cabrera has
Sempromipe, y la
proposed,
doctora Katy
executive
Suominen,
director
en cuanto
of
a cómo estamos
Sempromipe,
en el
and
comercio electrónico.
Ms.
¿Verdad?
Katy
El comercio electrónico ha
Suominen
redefinido
with
la
regards
forma
to
como
e-commerce,
venden,
and
cómo compran
e-commerce
los
has reactivated the
consumidores.
way how
Al
the
mismo tiempo ha
people
subido la
buy
barra
and
de lo que
sell,
los
and at the same
compradores
time
esperan,
it
de
has
entregas más
um,
rápidas,
elevated
mínimos
the bar to
retrasos,
see how we
procesos de
buy.
devolución simples,
And
mínimas
so it's
complicaciones.
minimum and
Y las empresas también se
communications, and the
benefician al poder
companies
comprar
also benefit
electrónicamente
from being
partes de
able to
equipos de
buy
manufactura, insumos que les
manufacture
permiten
inputs, and
minimizar sus tiempos
that
de
allows
respuesta en
them
los
to
procesos de producción. Entonces, vemos
decrease
acá el comercio
production
electrónico como una
processes. We see that
excelente
electronic
forma,
trade is an
no
excellent
tanto como
way,
un fin en sí mismo, pero una excelente forma de vincular
excellent
los
way
procesos productivos a
of
las cadenas
showing the
de valor
productive
globales.
processes of the
Y acá
global chains.
principalmente
And
cómo
here,
amarramos
mainly,
también este
how do we
tejido de las
tie
micro,
this
pequeñas y medianas
fabric of the
empresas
micro,
a
small, and
estos
medium enterprise
procesos
to these
globales de valor.
global value processes?
Tanto Katy como David
Both
nos
Kathy and
dieron
David
cifras interesantes del
talked about
crecimiento
very
y
interesting
también
figures of growth
retos que aún nos
and
quedan,
also
entre
about
ellos
the
el reto de la
challenges that
logística.
exist with regards to
Tenemos
logistics.
bastante
We
información,
have quite a
estudios
bit of
que se
information
ha
and
hecho tanto
studies
Centromipe como
that
otros donantes que
Sempromipe
yo he
and
tenido
other
personalmente
donors have
la
made,
oportunidad también de trabajar
which
en los mismos.
they have had the
Y
opportunity to
pues
work
estamos ante un proceso que no
together
es
with
fácil, ¿verdad? En el
Sempromipe.
comercio
And
transfronterizo,
this is
la
a process
facilitación
that
de
is
comercio
not
es más fácil
easy,
decirlo
transboundary
que
trade,
caminarlo, que
and
hacerlo.
e-commerce is easier to say
Y es un
than
proceso
rather
complicado donde
to work.
intervienen
It's a
múltiples
complicated
actores
process. It
con
has multiple
distintos fines,
actors
distintas
with
formas de
different
llegar a los mismos,
purposes and
donde
different
están
ways of getting to
compradores que
them.
esperan
We
su
have the
producto rápido, al
buyers
menor
that
costo,
expect for
vendedores que
fast
buscan,
business and less
clientes
cost,
que buscan
and clients that are
utilidades.
seeking
Están los
opportunities,
servicios de
and
logística,
there
los
are
pagos
logistics
internacionales,
services,
los servicios de
international
transporte,
payments,
servicios de
transportation
gestión aduanera
services,
y
and
principalmente los
customs management
controles.
services,
Los
and
controles que
particularly the
nos
controls
llevan a cumplir estándares de
that will
seguridad.
comply security
Pues
standards.
primero la aduana con el tema de
First,
recaudación, los
customs with
estándares de
regards to
seguridad,
collection
donde
of
pueden venir armas, explosivos, el tema de
and also
antinarcóticos, la
they
salud,
are
la
looking
sanidad
at
agropecuaria,
explosive and narcotics and
controles
firearms,
ambientales,
etc., and
preservación del
environmental
patrimonio cultural
controls
y
and
varios
cultural
otros que se me
heritage
quedan.
and several
Entonces
others.
estamos hablando
So
ante
we're
un reto
talking
grande,
about
¿verdad?
a very big challenge.
Y bueno,
And
entre los hallazgos que hemos
among the
podido
findings that we
ver
have
en
been
la
able
región,
to
y esto parte de un
see
reciente
in the
estudio
region,
del
and
proyecto
this is
de
part of a
USAID
recent
para la
study of
facilitación de
a
comercio y
trade
gestión de
facilitation
fronteras,
project and border
algunos de los
management of
retos, creo que
USAID. Some of
más
the
vinculados
challenges,
al
I
tema de
think the
envíos
ones that are
expeditos, es
most
primero, ante esa
topics
complejidad, ¿verdad?
is that
Nos hacen
complexity.
falta estándares de información y
And I don't know,
transparencia,
there's missing
saber
standards
cuáles son
of
los requisitos, cuáles
transparency
son
to see what are the
los procesos.
requirements, what are the
Hay
processes.
avances, pero no están
There is
estandarizados.
progress, but they're not
Nos hace falta tener
standardized.
las reglas del
We
juego
still need
claras y
to have
claras
clear
también ante el
rules of the
modelo de
game
negocios que estamos hablando
and
ahora
the
y
business
que
model that we're
respondan
talking
a
about
la
today and
naturaleza
respond
y a las
to
necesidades del comercio.
the nature and trade
Tenemos que
needs.
avanzar hacia
We
la
have to
digitalización y
advance
los procedimientos sin
to
papeles para tener un caso de
border
uso
without
que
papers, to
realmente
have
respalde un
to be
proceso
able to
100% digital
back these
y la calidad de los
processes and
servicios
100% of the quality of
y los procesos que
services
dependen de la
and
demanda,
the
de la capacidad de
processes
las
that
empresas
depend
de
on the
entenderlos, de
demand and
usarlos,
the
de
capacity
las
of
mejoras y
using
de
them and
adaptarse
make
a los mismos.
improvements.
Entonces, en esta sesión,
And so in
yo
this
paro de
session,
hablar y empiezo con
and I
ustedes,
don't
que
stop
son
to
los que
talk,
día a día viven estos
and
temas
but I have to say
y
that
podemos
you
profundizar
live
acá.
on these
Entonces,
topics on a
viendo el
day-to-day
avance
and
que
seeing the
tenemos en
progress that we
Centroamérica,
have
pero
in
los
Central
retos que aún nos
America, but the
quedan para adelante,
challenges that we have looking
y ver hacia
forward
dónde
and
tenemos
see
que ir, ¿verdad?
where we
¿Cuál
are
es su
heading to.
visión sobre la
What is your
logística
vision
y la
about the
facilitación del
logistic
comercio
and trade
a nivel global?
facilitation at the
¿Cómo ven
global
que los
level? How
servicios
do
de
you
logística
see that the
transfronterizos van a avanzar
transboundary
para atender un
logistic
mercado cada
services
vez
will
más
advance to
interconectado?
have a more
Entonces empiezo, le
uh,
cedo la palabra
a
a
greater
María
market.
Fernanda
So I give
Font
the floor
para
to
que
Maria
inicie y luego
Fernanda Font
seguimos
so
con
that she can
Marieli
start,
y María
and
Luisa.
then
Por
we
favor,
go
María Fernanda.
with Jenny and
Gracias,
thank
Gabriela.
you,
Un gusto
Gabriela.
estar
It's a
acá.
pleasure to be
Yo no
here.
te veo sino a ti, pero creo que los otros colegas míos panelistas están, pero bueno, así que no pasa nada. Tú me avisas si
You let
cierro
me
el
know.
audio o la
Adelante,
I
imagen o algo
cannot
adelante,
así.
see
María
you, but
Fernanda,
yes,
por
yes,
favor.
thank you. Please go
Dale,
ahead.
gracias.
Thank you.
Bueno, creo que tú lo has dicho
I think
bastante
that you have
en tu
talked a lot
introducción, o
about
sea, el panorama,
the
hay muchos
panorama.
actores, hay
There's
muchos
many
desafíos,
actors. There are
hay
many
dificultades,
challenges. There's great
eso
difficulties,
lo has dicho, y
and that
hablaste
has
una
been
palabra que anoté
said.
acá, varias
And
palabras, estándares de
you
seguridad,
use
por
several
ejemplo.
words like security standards, for
Acabamos de
example,
venir, si puedo ya decir, estamos en una
and
post-pandemia,
we
no sé qué
are
tan
now at a
seguro es eso de
post-pandemic
decirlo, pero
situation,
estamos recientes teniendo esta
but we are
experiencia de lo
very
que es una pandemia,
recently
un tema
working on
global,
this
un tema de
area,
salud.
a global
Y la pregunta que
part,
haces
and
es,
the question that you
¿cómo
make,
vamos a avanzar?
how are we going
Creo que
to start? I
ante
think
cualquier cosa
that
hay que continuar adaptándose.
we have
Y
to
eso para
continue
mí es
to
como la
adapt.
palabra clave,
And this is
esa
for me the
flexibilidad
key
y
word, the
continuar
flexibility,
adaptándose. O sea, acabamos
and to
de
continue
venir de estos
adapting.
años en donde
And throughout these
constantemente
years
había
where
que
we have
cambiar un
constantly
poco
had to
las reglas estaban cambiando,
changed,
las
the
condiciones,
rules, the
oferta
conditions were changing,
reducida,
the
servicios se
supply was
cerraban,
reduced, services were
las líneas
closing
de
down,
aviones también cerradas, algún
and
país
also the
cerrado
airlines were closing.
completamente,
There were countries that were fully closed,
cerrada
totally closed.
la exportación,
So
importaciones completamente con
exports
restricciones,
came to
y
a
de
halt,
alguna manera la
and
industria
somehow
fue
the
demostró mucha
industry
resiliencia para poder trabajar
showed
con todas
a
esas
lot of
barreras porque seguimos
resiliency with all of these
transportando
barriers
y
because we
llevando
continue to
el,
transport
el comercio, ¿no? Y
and
moviéndolo. Entonces, creo que esta es
continue to
no
be
solo
working
lección,
on trade.
sino en mi
This is
opinión,
not only a
algo
lesson,
que va a ser
but it's
constante en
something
cómo
that
avanzar.
will be
Es
constant.
ese tema de seguir
This is
adaptándose precisamente a
a
estos cambios, porque
topic
creo que
of
estos
to
cambios
adapt
van a continuar.
because
Y van a
these
continuar en
changes are
muchas
going to
maneras. Hablabas del
continue
tema de
in many
seguridad. Creo que
ways
estamos
in
recibiendo
security
muchísimas
and
peticiones de saber más
we will
información, cómo
receive
nosotros realmente podemos
more
tener
requests
información de las
for
cosas que
information,
se están transportando y cómo se pueden
information that is
transmitir, por
being
ejemplo, de una
transported
manera eficaz, de una manera
in an
completa, de una manera
effective
rápida.
way
De nuevo, estos son
and
requisitos
very
que están
broadly.
cambiando. Yo
These
no
are
estoy hablando de manera
requirements
muy
that are
genérica,
changing.
pero creo que lo
I'm
básico acá
talking
es el
about
cambio y
Latin
hay que
America,
seguir
but basically
transformándose. Y
there are
algo
changing
súper importante es
changes
que
and we have to
nosotros
continue.
siempre creo que
What
venimos
is so
promoviendo
important
un
is that
tema de
we
facilitación de comercio
promote
y de
trade
simplificación de procesos,
facilitation
¿no? Y creo
and
que a eso también hay que
improving
sumarle
the
una parte
processes.
humana. De
And
nuevo, la pandemia
to
nos ayudó a
this,
ver eso.
we
No es
have to
solamente los
state that the
goals
pandemic
corporativos, sino es,
helped not
vivimos
only
en un mundo que
for the corporate
se
world to
está
think, but we
deteriorando
also
si no
live in
hacemos
a
algo por el
world that
medio ambiente,
was
que tenemos que
deteriorating
abrir
if we
a las
wouldn't do something
oportunidades
for the
para
environment. We
que
have to open the
realmente exista
opportunities
diversidad,
so that
para que
there
todos
should be
puedan participar en
diversity
el
so that
mercado. Que
everybody can
acabamos de vivir
participate
una
in the
pandemia que
market.
vemos que en un
We
lugar
just have
que
gone through
pasa
a
algo,
pandemic,
boom, se
and
conecta
every time
inmediatamente
something
todo el mundo
happens,
y todo el mundo
everybody
queda
connects,
infectado. Entonces,
and or something
realmente
happens,
no
and then
estamos ajenos a ver eso. Entonces,
we
yo creo que
are
nuestro
not
tema de promoción,
far from
los
this, and
canales que siempre
the
usamos
channels that
y el
we
trabajo que
always
siempre
use
hacemos con
and the
el
work
sector
that we
privado y con
would
el sector
make
público,
with the
además de esos
public and private
procesos y de la
sectors, and
facilitación,
besides the
tienen que incluir
process and
mucho estos temas
facilitation,
que tienen
these
que ver
topics
con la
really
sostenibilidad, con el medio
have to
ambiente.
be worked on. It
Entonces,
has to do
aparte
with
de todo este cambio que
sustainability
viene,
and the
tenemos que ser muy
environment.
humanos,
So besides this
tenemos que ser
change,
muy reales, muy
we
conscientes de
have to be
nuestra
very
diversidad,
conscious of our
de la gente que realmente puede aportar
identity, of the people who
para
can
mover
really
la
contribute
economía
to move the
y de nuestro
economy
planeta. Y creo que esas
and
son las dos cosas que
move
vienen, o sea,
our
es una adaptación
planet
y es
around.
una promoción de las iniciativas con
And what comes
simplificación
is
y
a
con
promotion
conciencia
of
más
initiatives
humana
for
de dónde estamos
simplification,
viviendo
and
en
this is
este
what we
mundo.
are
Creo
living
que ahí te la dejo, es
in
bastante
right now,
genérica,
and
pero yo
there
creo
is
que
a
ahí
lot
vamos
of
por ahí se
information
va a
there.
avanzar.
Claro, el
Of
tema
course,
ambiental, ¿verdad? El tema de ambiental que nos toca
the
a todos y
environmental
que
issue
es
that
un
we all
reto
have to
también para
deal
el
with, it's
sector
also a challenge
logística y
for the
transporte
logistic and
fundamentalmente.
transportation sector.
Pasaría ahora con Ariel. Ariel,
Now I would like to speak to Ariel,
pasando la misma pregunta. ¿Cómo
asking the
ves tú
same question. How do
evolucionando
you
el
see
sector de
that the
logística transfronteriza y comercio
transboundary
electrónico
logistics
globalmente?
sector and e-commerce
Claro
is
que sí, Gabriela. ¿Me
advancing?
escuchan bien?
Of course,
Sí,
Gabriela.
perfecto.
Do you hear me?
Le
Perfecto,
voy a
pues.
pedir nada más a
I'm
Sempromite
going
si nos
to
puede poner la
ask from
visualización para que
Sempromite
todos
if you can
estuviéramos en la
show us a
pantalla. No sé si eso se
visualization as
puede,
though we would
pero
all be
continúa,
on
Ariel,
the
por favor.
screen. But please continue.
Sin ningún problema. Pues primero que nada, Gabriela, muchísimas gracias por el
Thank you very
panel,
much,
por
Gabriela,
moderar. La verdad que es un gusto verte de nuevo
me, the
y también a
moderator.
los
It's a
amigos
pleasure
de
to see you
Sempromite
again, and
y a mis
also the
colegas,
friends from
obviamente María Luisa
Sempromite
y
and
María
my colleagues,
Fernanda.
María Luisa and María
Creo que retomando un
Fernando.
poco la
To
tónica que nos deja María
go
Fernanda,
back to the topic that
la
Maria
pandemia del
Fernanda leaves,
COVID-19 nos dejó
the
y nos
COVID-19
sigue
pandemic
dejando
left
tremendísimas
us with and
enseñanzas, ¿no?
continues
En
to
el mundo
leave
logística
us with
express, primero que nada,
information,
la
the
resiliencia,
express
como bien
logistic
comentaba María
world, the
Fernanda, ese
resilience,
poder
as Maria
de
Fernanda was
adaptación
saying, that power
que
of
se necesita para poder
adaptation
reaccionar
that
a
is
la demanda de
necessary to be able
producción
to
y
react to the
consumo
demand of
que es tan
production and
crítica y que lo
consumption
fue
is
tan
so
crítica por
critical,
casi 2
or
años durante
was
la
so
pandemia.
critical for 2 years
Se ha
during
visto
the
un
pandemic.
crecimiento
We have
explosivo en los
seen
flujos de productos
explosive
básicos,
growth in
mercancías
basic
de bajo
products
valor, como
and
también insumos de la
low
salud,
cost
farmacéuticos,
merchandise
como lo
and
fueron en su
health
momento
inputs and
el traslado
pharmaceutical
de
inputs,
ventiladores
such as
pulmonares,
the
equipos
transfer of
médicos,
pulmonary
equipos de
ventilators and
protección
medical equipment
personal. Y
and
bueno,
personal
finalmente, ¿no?
protection
Las
equipment
vacunas.
and
Creo que
the vaccines.
el despliegue de vacunas a
The
nivel global
displacement of
fue
vaccines
algo que
globally
nunca se había
was
visto.
something that had never been
Durante
seen
ese
before.
periodo de
During that
18 meses,
period
y
of
muchos
18
todavía
months, and
seguimos
many
transportando vacunas,
continue
pero
to
ese despliegue
transport
que vimos en
vaccines. That
ese
the
corto periodo, creo que jamás
deployment
se había
of
visto.
vaccines in
La
such a
verdad
short
que
period had
se
never
pudo
been seen before.
demostrar
The
que
truth
si
is that
se
it was
quiere,
able
se
to be
puede.
shown that if
Y
we
en
want, we
cantidades
can.
que la verdad que son
And in
impresionantes, ¿no? Millones
quantities
y
that are
millones de
truly
vacunas y
impressive,
otros insumos que se
millions of
movieron
vaccines
muy
and other
rápidamente
types of
por todos los
inputs that
rincones del
move
mundo,
so
¿no?
quickly throughout all
Eso
the corners of the
permitió
world. This
a
allowed
muchos confirmar el potencial que
many
hoy
to confirm
existe
the
en la logística
potential that
express,
exists
en la
today in the
logística de
express
nuestras empresas.
logistics
Con la
in our
pandemia,
companies. Now with
a
the
Dios gracias,
pandemic,
en declive,
thank
las
goodness,
tendencias
is
naturalmente se
declining.
van
The
estabilizando un
trends
poco,
naturally are
pero claramente se
stabilizing
deja
somewhat,
establecido que las
but it
cadenas de valor,
clearly established
estas
that the value
autopistas
chains,
logísticas
these
que
logistic
siempre se tenían y que se demostraron
gateways that
durante la
we always
pandemia,
had and that were
pueden y
shown during
deben
the pandemic
poderse
can and
adaptar a las
should
realidades del mercado,
adapt to the
sean
realities of the market.
pequeños, micros y
The
medianos
small,
empresarios,
micro, and
hasta
medium
las empresas
entrepreneurs,
más grandes del
even the
mundo.
largest
Estas
companies
cadenas de
around the
valor,
world,
estas
these value chains,
autopistas logísticas que se han
these
creado,
logistic
sirven para
gateways or
todo,
freeways
siempre que se pueda
serve
adoptar.
for all
El
as
comercio
long as
exterior,
it
la
can
verdad
be
que ha abierto
adapted.
oportunidades sin
And foreign
precedentes, ¿no?
trade,
Para hacer que el comercio sea más inclusivo, ¿no? Que no sea
so that the
solo
trade be
un
more
campo de
inclusive,
juego
it
para las
shouldn't only
grandes empresas,
be
sino que sea un campo de
a
juego para
playing
todos
field for
y
the
que todos
large
tengan acceso a
enterprise. It
ese
should
campo,
be
permitiendo que
a field for
pequeñas y
all
medianas
the
empresas
companies,
crezcan,
and
aumenten su
that
participación en la
these
economía
companies should
y
make
realicen
the
esos
economy
beneficios de
grow
poder
and
exportar
carry out the benefits of
y de
being
tener
able to
acceso a
export and
insumos
to
de
have
importación que
access to
ayuden
import
a
inputs that
tener
will help
productos
to have
completos, productos finales que ellos
for
también puedan
end
exportar.
products that they can
Eso es muy
also
importante
export.
porque
This is
enfocamos
very
mucho la
important
mirada
because we
hacia la exportación,
focus
pero
more
muchos de nuestros
towards
MIPYMES también
exportation, but
dependen
many of our
de
MSME
insumos
also
constantes,
depend on
seguros
constant
y de buen costo competitivo
products,
de
inputs,
importación,
good
para ellos
cost and
poder
competitive
finalizar
of
y producir lo
importation
que
in order for
necesitan
them to
para los mercados donde van
produce what they
incursionando cada
need
día más y más.
for the markets that
Yo
they enter
dejaría
into
esas dos
in a
enseñanzas,
more,
¿no? La
I
resiliencia,
would leave these two
ese poder de
learnings, the
adaptarse
resilience, the
y
power
estas
to
cadenas
adapt,
de valor,
and
autopistas
these
logísticas, que
logistic
se flexibilizaron,
freeways
que
of
se
the value
demostraron
chains that were
durante la
flexibilized, as
pandemia y que ahí
were
siguen, ahí están.
seen during the
Esa
pandemic,
infraestructura no desaparece,
and
ahí
that
está y la
structure
debemos
doesn't
de
disappear.
apalancar
It's
para el uso
there, and
mayor
we
de
need to
MIPYMES en toda la región.
make it grow for the use of the
Excelente, Ariel, muchas
MSMEs.
gracias.
Thank you very much,
Esta
Ariel.
pues experiencia que han tenido ustedes
The
desde
experience
las
that you have
empresas de
had,
logística en esa adaptación
the
a construir las
adaptation
autopistas
to
logísticas,
build the
pues es un
logistic freeways
aprendizaje de gran
is a
valor a futuro
learning, a
para
great
esos
value
objetivos de desarrollo que
for
queremos
the
llegar.
development
Entonces sigo con María Luisa
objectives. And so I continue with Maria
para
Luisa
concluir esta primera pregunta,
to
María Luisa,
conclude
por
this
favor.
Gracias,
first question.
Gabriela.
Thank
Me
you, Maria
dejas de
Luisa.
últimas aquí, después
You
de mis
leave
dos
me
colegas, creo que han hecho un gran
as the
trabajo
third after my colleagues have
poniendo
done
la
great work to
información sobre
putting
la
the
mesa. Yo
information on
diría
the table.
que para mí hay
I would say that for
tres áreas
me,
que
there are
son
three areas that
importantes
are
para
very
tomar en cuenta.
important to be
Con base
taken
también
into
en lo que han dicho María
consideration
Fernanda y
based
lo que han
on what
dicho
Maria
Ariel.
Fernanda and
Si
Ariel
vemos
have
el comercio
said.
electrónico
If we
hacia el
see
futuro,
e-trade towards the future,
algo que aprendimos también
something that
durante
we
la pandemia,
learned
que
during
es
the
un reto,
pandemic,
es que
which is a
todavía no
challenge, is that
existe
there
una
still
infraestructura
is no
digital totalmente
digital
desarrollada que ayude a las
infrastructure
MIPYMES a que puedan
completely developed
entrar a
that will
hacer
help the MSME
el
to be
negocio
able
en
to
línea, y
enter
en
and make
Centroamérica
business
vemos
online.
esto.
And Central
Entonces,
America, we
para
see
el
this.
futuro es
So
necesario
for
que
the
no
future, it is
perdamos en
necessary
mente, en
to
vista
not
esta
lose
parte de que
sight
todavía hay zonas
of this
rurales o
part where
zonas
there's
que no
still
tienen
rural areas or
acceso
areas
digital,
that do not
donde
have
tenemos
digital
que tener
access, where we have to
esto en
have that.
cuenta
Keep that in
para
mind
poder asegurarnos,
in
como
order to be
decían
able
Ariel y
to
María Fernanda, de que exista
ensure,
competitividad y de que
as Mariana and
todos en
Maria
la
Fernandez
comunidad,
was saying,
en
that
la
there's
sociedad puedan participar
competitiveness and that the
dentro de
society can
este comercio
participate
digital.
within
Lo
these
otro que vimos,
e-commerce.
y yo sé
The
que
other
nos
thing
dices
that we
viendo hacia el
said
futuro,
and
viendo hacia la pandemia,
seeing the
lo
future
otro que
or
aprendimos en
going
esto
back,
fue
seeing the
que
pandemic, what we
se
also learned
abrieron
that
oportunidades, ventanas
ventanas y oportunidades
new
a
windows
mi
of
pymes
opportunity
de conectar con
for
consumidores
MSME
que de otra
open to
forma
contact
nunca
with
hubieran
consumers
conectado.
Y
consumers
como
that
dice Ariel y
otherwise
como
they
decía
would
María
have never
Fernanda, no
connected with.
necesariamente
And
puede ser
as
exportación,
my
puede ser
predecessor said, it
aún
doesn't
conectar
have to
con,
be
con
importation. It could
consumidores
also be to
domésticamente, ¿no? Dentro del
contact with
país.
their local
Y creo
consumers
que
within
viendo hacia el
their
futuro,
countries
aprendiendo
and
esta
looking
parte,
forward,
y creo
learning from
que
that
Katy
part.
lo mencionó
I
en su
think
presentación muy
that they
importante,
also mentioned it
tenemos
in
que
the
asegurarnos de que
presentation.
seguimos
We
y
have to
continuamos
ensure
con
that
la
we continue
capacitación necesaria para todas
training
las MIPYMES entender
the
qué quiere
MSMEs
decir
for them
conectar
to
con esos
understand what
clientes
does
de
it mean
forma
connect with those
digital y
customers in
no
a
es,
digital manner.
es un
And
trabajo en equipo de
this is
comunidad, son los
teamwork,
gobiernos, son el sector privado,
is a
somos
communal
nuestra
work,
industria
it's the
que
government, it's the private
ayudamos y
sector, it's the
facilitamos
industry that we
esta
help and
opción. Entonces creo que
facilitate
es algo
this
que
option. I
tenemos
think it
no
is
perder de vista
something
porque pues
that
ya
we shouldn't lose
tal
sight
vez
of,
se dice, bueno, ya todo el mundo sabe, ya
because
tienen suficientes
everybody
entrenamientos
they
de Zoom,
think
pero es
that
necesario
everybody
seguir
knows
esa
and they have the training,
capacitación.
but it's
Y
necessary to continue
finalmente,
training. And finally,
yo creo que
I think
viendo
that
hacia el futuro digital, me
again,
encantó mucho,
looking
como decía María
to
Fernanda,
the digital
vienen
future, I
temas
love what Maria Fernanda said. There
de
comes
sostenibilidad, vienen temas
sustainability,
de cómo nos aseguramos que la sociedad
and
está
how do we ensure
trabajando
that the
en
society is
conjunto. Y
working
yo creo que
together
ahí es un
are
tema de
coming.
cómo
And I think it's an
vemos como
issue of
comunidad que
how,
el
as a
comercio
community, we
electrónico
see that
va a continuar
electronic
siendo algo
trade
que
will
ayuda
continue
a
to be
facilitar
something
ese
that will help to
diálogo y esos
facilitate the
temas
dialogue and those
que tenemos que tener
topics
en cuenta,
that
¿no?
we
De
have to
sostenimiento,
keep in mind
de
of
inclusión,
sustainability,
etcétera. Entonces, yo
inclusion,
creo
etc.
que es una revolución que vemos que
This
está
is a
pasando.
revolution that
Quiero
we
decir
see that
alguna
is going
estadística que a
on.
mí
I would like to
me
say
impresionó
also
mucho
that
en
I
los
was very
meses de la
impressed
pandemia y en mi
during
familia,
pandemic
es
and also
cómo
with my
los
family
mayores de
is
60
how
años, mis papás,
the elders above 60
empezaron a usar
years, my
comercio
parents, started
electrónico,
to
viven en
use
Honduras,
uh,
usando tarjetas de crédito,
e-trade and
confiando poner
Honduras.
su
So you
tarjeta de
use
crédito en una computadora
credit
o en el
cards and they
teléfono.
trusted putting
Esto
their
es algo que
credit
hacia el
cards
futuro
either on the
tenemos que
phone or
tomar
on
en
the
cuenta como
computers, which is
infraestructura
we have
de
to take into
seguridad y
account
logística
of
en
security
los
and
gobiernos,
logistic
¿no? Porque es
infrastructure
algo
in the governments,
que
how they trusted to do that.
esta
And
parte de
this
la
part
sociedad, que son los que
of
a veces tienen
society,
mayor recursos, no
which is the
tenían
one that
acceso, y
had
viendo
greater
hacia el futuro
resources, they
cómo
didn't
vamos a
have
mejorar
access, or seeing
esa
towards the
conexión
future,
y esa
saying how we're
transferencia, ese
going to
cambio
improve
de actividades.
that change of
Ahí paro porque
activities. And I will
creo que
stop here.
dije lo
Excelente.
mismo que dijeron María Fernanda y Ariel.
I think I said the same
Muchas
that Maria
gracias a
Fernanda
los
said.
tres
Thank you so much to
y lo
three of
bueno
you.
es que vamos en la misma coincidencia, ¿verdad?
The good thing is that we
está la
are
parte de la
working along
resiliencia,
the
la
same
parte de
lines,
las
the part of
autopistas
resilience
logísticas que se
and
han
logistic
construido, se han
freeways
pavimentado,
that
digamos, en esta
have been
última
built, have been
etapa de
paved, and
pandemia y
now we're in the
pospandemia,
pandemic and
y la
post-pandemic
importancia de
phase
ese
and the
trabajo en equipo,
importance
¿verdad?
of
Y
teamwork,
trabajo en equipo generando confianza también
generating trust
entre todos los actores.
among all of the actors or
Como
stakeholders.
les contamos, hemos realizado
As we were
varios
saying,
diagnósticos en la
I
región
didn't
que indican
realize
que el costo de los
the
envíos es uno
diagnosis
de
that
los
the cost of
factores
service
que
is one of the
está
factors
limitando el
that
potencial
is
de las empresas
limiting
en
the
aprovechar
potential
este
of
comercio
the companies
digital.
for them
Y
to take advantage of this
digamos,
e-commerce
focalizándonos más en
or
las
digital trade
entregas internacionales, ¿verdad? En los
and
envíos
focusing more
internacionales,
on
para mejor decir.
international
Desde su
challenges.
experiencia operativa,
From your operational
trabajando día a día
experience,
con estos
working
envíos,
on a
con los
day-to-day
requisitos de aduanas y
basis
otras
with the
agencias de
customs
control
requirements and
fronterizo,
other border
las prácticas de
control
las empresas
agencies,
también,
the practices
¿cómo
of
describirían el
how would you
estado de la
describe
logística
the state
transfronteriza
of
en la región
transboundary
del SICA?
logistic in the
¿Está
SICA region?
funcionando bien? ¿Qué está
Is it
funcionando
working
bien? ¿Y
well?
qué
What is
deberíamos
working
mejorar?
well
Y
and what
entonces
should we
aquí,
improve?
para cambiar un poco de dinámica,
So
vamos a
here to
empezar
change
con
a bit of
Ariel,
the
luego
dynamics, we're
María
going
Luisa
to
y María
continue
Fernanda.
with
Por favor,
Ariel, then
Ariel.
Maria Luisa, and then Maria Fernanda.
Estás en mute, Ariel.
Ay, perdón, ahora sí me escuchan.
Now you
Estaba
can
en
hear
mute.
me. I was on mute.
Bueno, no, gracias, Gabriela. No soy
Thank
médico,
you.
pero voy a
I'm
intentar
not a
hacer
doctor,
una
but
breve
I'm going to
analogía
try
médica,
to make
si me permiten.
a
Mira,
brief
yo lo veo
medical
de
analogy,
esta
if you
forma.
allow me. I see
Vemos
it this
un
way.
estado
We
estable en
have a
general,
stable
pero con dolencias, yo
status in
diría que en
general,
algunos
but
mercados que
with
deben atenderse
issues
muy
in certain
prontamente.
markets that need to be
Mientras
taken
que en
care
otros
of
mercados
very
vemos
soon.
señales
While in
positivas,
other
incluyendo
markets
algunos
we see
países en
positive
Centroamérica,
signs,
que
including
con
Central
tal vez un
America.
poco más de ejercicios
Maybe
recetados
with a
por
bit
la
more
OMC
exercise
y la OMA, inclusive
given
también de mejores
by
prácticas de la industria y del comercio exterior,
the
podrían
World Health
empezar a convertirse en
or the
plataformas de servicios
Customs
logísticos
Organization, we could
muy
start working with
interesantes, por no decir
logistic services,
formidables, que inclusive
very
podrían competir con
interesting or
algunos
maybe
mercados en Asia.
formidable. They could even compete with
Mira,
some
tenemos que
Asian
hablar del
markets. We have to
nearshoring, ¿no?
talk
Este
about the
fenómeno del
nearshoring.
nearshoring o del
This
ally shoring,
nearshoring or ally
creo que es
shoring,
precisamente
I think is
la tónica,
precisely
la oportunidad que
the
debemos aprovechar
opportunity that we need
como
to take
región para atraer
advantage
más
of as a
inversión,
region to attract more
para desarrollar
investment,
más capital
to
humano,
develop
¿no? Que
more
se
human
adapte a las nuevas
capital
realidades
that will adapt to the new
de lo
realities
que se debe de estar produciendo,
of what should
de
be
aumentar
produced,
capacidad productiva
to increase
y de
productive
aumentar flujos de
capacity
comercio
and to
exterior,
increase
tanto en la importación, como decía,
trade
como en la
flows, both in
exportación,
importation
desde
and
ya sea nuestros socios
exportation,
comerciales en la región,
and
inclusive
our
y empezando
commercial
por Estados
partners in the
Unidos.
region and starting from the United States.
Sin embargo, todo eso dicho,
However, all of
el
this,
comercio
having said
internacional
all of this,
competitivo demanda
transnational,
implementar
competitive
instrumentos,
transnational
medidas que
trade
realmente
demands
faciliten los
measures that
procesos
really will
aduaneros, los
facilitate the
procesos en
customs
fronteras,
processes, the border
obviamente sin
processes,
abandonar controles
obviously
efectivos
without
que
abandoning
cada
the effective
economía
controls
necesite
that each
desarrollar.
economy needs to
Creo que en
develop.
Centroamérica muchos
I
países
think in
como
Central
Guatemala, Costa
America, most
Rica, El
countries
Salvador,
like
se
Guatemala, Costa
están
Rica, El
beneficiando.
Salvador
Estamos
are
viendo una
receiving benefits, and
apertura
we're seeing an
hacia la
openness
instalación de medidas
towards the
efectivas
installment
en el
of
comercio exterior.
measures on foreign trade.
Y como miembros de la
And as
Organización Mundial de
members of
Comercio
the
y como signatarios
World
del Acuerdo de Facilitación de
Trade
Comercio, están tomando los pasos
Organization,
correctos.
they're taking
Creo que
the
dentro del
correct
Acuerdo de Facilitación de
steps.
Comercio se establecen
And I think in
algunas
the
disposiciones
trade
que ya se están
facilitation,
enfocando los
there
países
are
de la
issues
región.
that the countries of the region are
Una
already
cosa es
focusing on.
pues
And one thing
comprometerse con la
is to
implementación de
commit
algunas
with the
medidas, otra cosa es
implementation of some
realmente
measures, and the other thing is to
implementarlas.
really implement them.
Y los tiempos de
And
implementación,
the
¿no? Que hemos
times of
visto
implementation, we
lamentablemente en
have
los últimos
seen,
años
unfortunately, in the
que
last
se
few
van
years that
deteriorando los tiempos y los
the
plazos que se
times
han
and the
comprometido.
periods
Eso tenemos que retomarlo
deteriorate,
y tenemos
and we
que
have to take
hacer
this back
énfasis
up,
en
and we have
que
to make
se le
emphasis
dé prioridad.
that
Creo que durante
priority
los
is
2
given.
años de pandemia, algunos países
Between the 2
aprovecharon
years of pandemic,
y
some
empezaron a
countries
acelerar
took
su
advantage of it
implementación.
and
Otros
started to
países no lo hicieron
accelerate its
y creo que hoy se
implementation. Other
encuentran
countries didn't do it,
en una
and I think
disyuntiva
now
o
they're
tal vez
at
en un
a
estado
point
de competencia muy agresiva por los países
and
que
a very
hicieron lo que tenían
aggressive
que hacer,
competition of
que
the countries who
siguieron
did
esa
what they had
receta.
to do and that followed the recipe.
Obviamente hay herramientas que la
Obviously,
industria de
there's
logística
tools
express
that the express
ven como
logistic
muy
industry
beneficiosas.
sees as very beneficial.
Nosotros en
We,
general movemos
in general,
muchísimos envíos, millones de envíos al día,
send
que son de bajo valor
millions of
y
shipments
que
a day,
realmente
which are
no
low
representan
value and really do
altos
not represent
riesgos siempre y
high
cuando
risks
existan mecanismos de control,
as long as
existan
control mechanisms
procesos y
exist and
gestión de
there's
riesgos que
processes and
realmente y
risk management
efectivamente
processes
puedan
that really and
identificar dónde están
effectively
los
can
riesgos.
identify
Pero que al
what
final
they
y a la
are.
larga son
I think
mercancías de
in
bajo
the
valor,
long term,
muchos de
these are
ellos
low cost
producidos
merchandise,
por
and many of them produced by
y muchos de ellos
MSMEs, and
objetos
many
y
of them
mercancías que son
are objects and merchandise
producto de consumo local.
that are
Entonces
local
se tiene
consumption
que
products.
priorizar
And
mecanismos
to
fáciles,
prioritize
procesos
easy
simples, como decía
and
María Luisa,
simple mechanisms and
para que
processes,
las
and
pymes y
David
los
was saying,
consumidores
and Maria
no
Fernanda
tengan
was saying, so
que
that
convertirse en
consumers
expertos
do
en
not have to
logística
become
y en materia de
experts in
comercio exterior, sino que
logistics and
de la mano con una empresa
hand in hand with a logistic company and any one of the one that
incursionar
represent
en el
here
comercio exterior pueda tener acceso a más productos, a más mercancía, locales, o lamentablemente hay que reenfocarnos un poco en cuáles son esas medidas que ayudan a los que ayudan a ese aumento del comercio exterior y muchos de ellas están tan representadas por los acuerdos que ya se han comprometido.
María Luisa, perdón, adelante.
Yes. Go ahead, Maria Luisa. Yes, I believe that we should think going on that line with regard to the cross-border logistics in Central America. Let's think of three words: infrastructure, transparency, and consistency. And I believe what Ariel is mentioning refers to this transparency and consistency. And infrastructure is what I believe that we need to continue taking a look in the region that I'm referring to, airports, roads, because if we're talking about e-commerce and you sell a product, you need to take and transport the product, right? You need to move that product, and I believe that the region still needs continue thinking of how to invest in infrastructure in such a way that it connects to the population and that helps reduce the costs, because this is a challenge in the region. Also, regulatory transparency and policy regulations of foreign work in the region. As Ariel was mentioning, there are still opportunities to improve this in the region. And there is also an important fact that is in Latin America, we saw good practices that were implemented during the pandemic, like the vaccines, logistics, that our companies moved in the region. And we also saw good practices that we all started implementing, and they are now trying to go back with certain practices. There is what I think we need to have consistent policies that will help us to achieve more efficiency in the movement. Also, transparency for SMEs, for any other companies, for companies, is how to know what to expect. That there is this transparency on the government side, and this continues to be important. And I agree with Ariel that there are certain countries that are moving forward, and I think there are still certain aspects that need to be improved that would make them better. And finally, automatization is basic because it also brings transparency at the same time. This is something that we see it's needed in the region. And also in terms of payment automatization, document automatization, other things that are included in what Ariel mentioned in uh, or the ONC, which is the World Trade Organization. Yes, thank you, Maria Luisa. I'm not going to repeat, but I love the three words you mentioned. I don't know if it was four, but you mentioned infrastructure, transparency, consistency, and automatization, right? I believe that everything you said, I totally agree with it, but I want to add one more, which is trust or confidence, because I'd like to talk about certain things that can be improved. As you asked at the beginning, cross-border logistics is something that is happening with the resources available, healthy resources, as Ariel said. It's not that bad, but it can be improved, of course. And if all players or actors and stakeholders that participate start pushing, then we're going to see improvements, and it will provide confidence. And I can say so because of what I talk always with the panelists that are here, or other big companies, where we share this confidence that through the years. And so I think that here we have an opportunity of making advances and continue improving. If we really want to promote and make progress in commerce, there has to be interests, common interests in security, and it can be done. You can say this are the people, the operators with whom you share confidence. I can exchange information with these providers, understand and focus, learn on certain things that generate certain risk for the country without affecting or stop or increase the costs of commerce, and that would not generate risk. So I think that this is what can be improved. That is to take these concepts that are not new and give life to those projects or programs that we have, uh, achieve their highest potential. So this is, I think, um, what we are talking about. Make use of the potentials. That is what I would add to what you said, aside of what the rest of the colleagues said. Thanks, Maria Fernanda. We have someone that was sick, but is not sick anymore, just needs to take 5 medicines, which is infrastructure, transparency, consistency, automatization, and trust or confidence, right? So this is a recipe from our doctor. Now we have rest on the other side of our coin, which is logistics. On one hand, we have the customs agencies, and we see how digital technology needs also, aside of people, institutions, we have the aspect of innovating services. And in this case, we would very much like to know more about you, what you are doing in terms of the industry and how each one of you is innovating to address the management of small volume or small value um, cargoes for SMEs, and how we could favor the inclusion of SMEs in these international conventions, talking here about global value chains and also the actors who import inputs and others. So there we go again discussing. We will start with Ariel in our panel, and then DHL and UPS will continue giving us their comments. I thought you were going to start with Maria Luisa to make this even. Well, I believe that as Maria Luisa was saying and Maria Fernanda, innovation is very important for us, for the express, and really this was based on innovation. It's a constant innovation. We are innovating every day. So the panorama is working is every day. The environment changes every day. So, and it goes from the smallest to the biggest actor, so that the dynamism and innovations that have helped us and become more resilient. You just need to think that the technological processes that needed to move hundreds and thousands of um, merchandise that is moved through customs, through offices, until they are delivered at a relative's, a friend's home, or at a manufacturing plant or children's hospital. Just imagine all the technological processes that take place in that system. And that may sound complicated, and it really is. But for a micro or a small medium enterprise, this is not a reason to not to make use of this, to make a transition to a global market hand in hand with companies like ours. And SMEs can do this through us. And they have done this and will continue doing this because our industry works hand in hand with the entrepreneurs to train them and to accompany them towards exports everyone has its technological tools that allow them to integrate these technologies in their sales processes. I'm talking about SMEs that are already doing e-commerce that allow them to integrate and having warehousing and all the logistic processes. So we allow access to them to a platform that facilitates not only the sales, but also distribution at the local market, regional market, and even further. So these are dynamic, innovative processes that we are reinventing every day so that we can favor the smaller or also bigger customers, entrepreneurs that need an ally, that need a partner for foreign trade. Okay, I think it's my turn. The, I think that I'm next. And I think that in regard to innovation, um, as company, what we can do is a lot. DHL, I have seen lots of robots. They have integrated new systems for inventory management. I've seen how packages are moved now. This is impressive, the technology, lots of artificial intelligence, field data. The agencies and the authorities require many codes and descriptions, language. So there's lots of innovation activities. But I like to say, and really, anyone it can benefits from this. It adds value, you know. But when we don't find, whenever you ask for information to do an export or an import, when you need information as quick as possible, you know how all this information moves in our networks. At the end, this is not going to be useful if we are not able to innovate the part that has to do with imports. That has to be simple, easy, you know. And another thing that I'd like to tell you in regard to innovation, and this is important for me, is that any type of person moving products to a certain part of the planet, because now we have lots of operations with more sustainable energy, and I'm talking here about vehicles, planes, electrical vehicles, and for example, also the ceilings of warehouses have solar panels, and all this is going to benefit the whole industry. But we need to see and take a look at this along the whole channel and supply chain. Yes, I think that what I like to add here, because I agree with Maria and Maria Fernanda, is you have already mentioned lots of aspects regarding innovation. And let's think, as Maria Fernanda is saying, that we need to think about a 360 innovation. That means from every angle. And there we see many aspects on the side of the consumers that want to have a greater visibility of how or when my package is going to arrive. And this is something that we as UPS innovate a lot, that technology, how we can provide that mental peace to our customers in the industry. And also the consumer change the perspective. So, and the SMEs need to be knowledgeable about this after the pandemic. Consumers want to have more information quicker, and they want their product now. My son, for example, if I ordered, let's say, a disguise or a costume, he is looking at his phone saying when his merchandise will arrive. It's incredible. And the other aspect relates to what we previously mentioned, which is that as industry, we work jointly in innovating in terms of recommendations for policies. And this is something unique. And I'm going to mention this because our three companies, we work on this. We are competitors, the three of us, the three competitors and companies, but we provide recommendations to the governments on how to improve the environment that will help also improve the environment for the companies. And I think this is innovative because I don't know if, Gabriela, it happens because you work with certain companies in certain aspects presenting policy recommendations, and that is innovation already, because you're aware that you need to improve and work on improving the environment. And something that we have not mentioned, and it seems important to me when we talk about SMEs, the majority of countries in Central America are a good number of companies in the different countries that have a domestic participation that are just entering the international market operation. And this is important to be considered because this needs innovation, automatization, technology to improve the cost and to be able to participate in the market. So our industry is the one that has the voice and can represent SMEs, because SMEs not always have that capacity of being representative. No, just don't turn off your cameras. We are going to deal now with our last question before going and continue with questions from the audience. We said strengthening confidence environment so that actors participate safely, transparently is important for the future of e-commerce, as well as having good rules, game rules for the structure, for automatization. And to conclude this session and provide elements for the public policy decision makers, also multilateral organizations that support e-commerce. I would like to know from you, who have all the knowledge of international logistics. We understand the needs of facilitating e-commerce in Central America to the inside as well as to the outside. We would like you to tell us a conclusion so that we can give to the member of the panel in these sessions. So could you briefly mention which are the realities for the governments to improve the business environment so that consumers and companies in the region can participate more in e-commerce? Well, this was the most difficult question, but I will try to answer. Gabriela, I would say that it is important for the governments in Central America to consider that we're going or living the economy of the 21st century, and that there is a need to reflect that the century 21 reality has to be reflected in the way how customs regulations are implemented and other types of regulations that have an impact in cross-border commerce, because what has changed in century 21 is the speed of also the connection between different consumers and countries, and also the role of who is participating in international commerce. This has changed, and that has to be reflected by the governments. I don't know how I did with but I will give now the floor to Maria Fernanda. And before finishing, I didn't want to talk bad. about people over 60. We are all young, you know. Yes, I always like and ask my kids to help me, but I see that uh, uh, you're always
Aquí les va.
attentive to whatever happens here. Ariel, please. Yes, I think that one competitive advantage of Central American region that other regions don't have is the economic integration system. And I think that this region, if they really want to do so, they could become a logistical platform or region that has not been seen in other countries in Latin America. And I guess this economic integration has to be used in first place to support the integration or harmonization of the customs processes in the region. And that is very much important. It plays in favor of SMEs, and I believe that it could highlight the Central American region as a big ally in the nearshoring phenomenon, because this is important for each one of the countries in Central America and the United States. And it doesn't end there. This logistical platform could be used also to have more commercial exchange with Europe, with Asia, with India as a subcontinent. So this is an advantage that cannot be left out. It's time now, and within this context of nearshoring, it's a tremendous opportunity. Thank you, Ariel. We conclude this call to action with Maria Fernanda, please. Thank you, Gabriela. I would say, and all this, what we mentioned, these 5 aspects, I was taking notes, and precisely one of that characteristics you mentioned, Ariel, which is process facilitation, making processes more easier. That is important for me, which is that we need to choose our priorities. This is the first, and one second, which is the strengthening of risk management. And that has to do with trust and with confidence. That means working with the private sector to make use of the existing programs and to work jointly to not to not to use time, costs, funds wisely, because there's lots of volume and not much time. So these are like my 2 recommendations or conclusions. Excellent, Maria Fernanda, Ariel, and Maria Luisa. Thank you so much. We have some questions here from the audience. We have 2 participants that have raised their hands, and we still have 6 minutes to conclude this part of our section. And I'd like to ask to Denise Rodati has her hand up. Mrs. Villanueva, if you could open your camera and send us your question. Mr. Dennis Villanueva, I see you have raised your hand. It seems he's not there at this moment, but we have another question from the audience, and this is regarding returns. In your experience working in global markets, what would be the best practice to deal with the returns in a cross-border process? I think Maria Luisa likes to comment. Is that okay? Yes. Well, returns is something that is a challenge for SMEs. Of course it is. And in Central America, due to the logistic cost of this, it is something that where we are seeing change, and we are seeing and understanding a cultural change, because in Central America, if you're selling to a consumer in the United States and Europe, there is the expectation that you can return a product. So, and as my grandmother said, if you have good accounts, then everything is settled, no problem. So it is important to have a clear mind on what the policies are in regard to returns. You have to have that very clear. And if you have that policy, who will cover the cost of return? There are companies who say, if you return this, you will cover the cost of transport. And that is important to consider as SME. And number three, to consider if your company is in a rural zone, for example, something that is not close to where you are, where you can have that delivery going on, to have it very clear what logistic process you can have in place, because there are differences. If, for example, your customers are in the United States, there is an option that you have your products in the United States instead of bringing your products back to Central America. So this is another of these sentences where we say if you have clear accounts settled, then everything is going to be okay. And this is what customers are waiting for. Gabriela, you're on mute. Yes, here I am. Sorry. So again, accounts clear, and you have a dense chocolate. This is a very Colombian expression. I don't see any more questions from the audience, but if you have any more questions, we have a question here from Rodrigo Rivas. He is a country manager of the USA project for the facilitation of trade. And he is asking, in the experience of the industry, what recommendation can you give us so that the Health Protection Agency, Human and Plant Agency are part also of options for trade facilitation?
Yo
A
creo
ver,
que
¿quién de ustedes? ¿Quién quiere empezar?
Pongo mi granito de arena
I
ahí,
would like
Gabriela.
to
La verdad,
answer.
cuando hablamos de ventanillas únicas de comercio exterior,
When we
creo
talk
que
about single
muchas veces se piensa
windows of
solamente en
trade
aduanas, ¿no? La
facilitation,
agencia
sometimes one
reguladora
only
de la
thinks about
frontera. Y
customs,
realmente
the
hay
regulating
muchísimas agencias,
agency of
¿no?
the border.
Y
There's
todo tiene
many
que converger
agencies,
en
and
una
everything has to
plataforma, en
converge
una
in
ventanilla
a
única
single
que
window
incluya a
platform
todas las
that
agencias
includes
fronterizas o que
all of the
tengan
border
incidencia en la
agencies so they
importación o
have
exportación
an
de productos
impact on
para que
importing or
sea lo
exporting
más
products so that it
transparente y lo
is
más simple
as
posible, ¿no?
transparent
Que no
and as
sea una
simple as
ventanilla
possible,
única
when it
para
shouldn't be a
aduanas y
single
otra
window
para
for
las
customs and a
agencias
single window
sanitarias
for
y otra
the
para
sanitary
temas de
agencies or
agricultura,
health agencies,
que
and
todo
another
esté
one for
integrado. Entonces,
agriculture.
esta
No,
receta que
everything should
hablábamos,
be
¿no?
integrated. This
Lo que
recipe
busca
that we
es
were
una
talking about
ventanilla
with seeds
única
is to have a single
consolidada,
window,
¿no?
a
A lo largo de todas las
consolidated single
agencias
window
fronterizas
throughout
y que
the
todas
border
tengan
agencies,
y
and
puedan
that all of
intercambiar
them
información,
can
¿no? Que
exchange
exista una
information, that there should be
interoperabilidad
an
entre ellas de la
interoperability
información que
among
el
them for
transportista,
the
que el
information
importador,
that the
que el
transporter,
remitente
that
pueda transmitir en forma
the
electrónica
agent, or that the
a esa
sender
única
could
ventanilla
transmit
única.
electronically to that single window.
Muchas gracias, Ariel.
Thank you very
María
much, Ariel.
Fernanda o María
María
Luisa nos
Fernanda
quieren
or María Luisa.
contribuir más a la pregunta.
Anything else that you can?
De acuerdo 100% con Ariel.
I agree 100% with Ariel.
María Luisa también está
María
de acuerdo.
Luisa agrees
De
also.
acuerdo.
Listo. Listo, bueno, entonces llevamos ya a la hora de esta sesión. Yo creo que
We have
podríamos pasar
reached the
nosotros
time for the
platicando sobre
session.
esto
I
toda la
think we could
tarde y
talk about
mañana,
this
pero
all
tenemos
afternoon
ya
today and
conectados a
tomorrow,
los
but
panelistas de la
we
siguiente
also
sesión.
have to
Y yo acá quiero darles
invite
las
the panel
gracias a
members from
ustedes
the
por
next
todas
section.
sus
So I want
contribuciones,
to
por
thank you
dedicar
so
el
much for
tiempo
your
también a esta
contributions and
sesión.
for
Y
your
quisiera
time to
luego
be
ya
here
darle
today,
la
and
palabra a
that
Katia
I will
para el
give the
cierre.
floor to
Muchas
Katia
gracias a
so
los
that
tres.
she can continue
Gracias,
with
Gabriela.
this. And thank you all. Thank you very
Perdón.
much.
Muchísimas gracias,
Thank
Gaby,
you,
a nuestros
Gabby, and our
representantes, actores
representatives
globales
and global
del sector
actors
privado,
from the private
UPS,
sector,
FedEx
UPS,
y DHL
FedEx, and
Express.
DHL
Gaby
Express.
Montenegro, has
Gabby
hecho una excelente
Montenegro,
facilitación y
you
como
made
tú
great
dices, este
facilitation. As you well
conversatorio
say, this
hubiésemos podido
conversation could
pasar
have
más
gone
horas conversando. Sin
on
duda
and on
tenemos
for hours.
grandes retos
We do have
y
big
temáticas
challenges
que
and
continuar impulsando
topics
en
that
la
we need to
región
continue
para
promoting in the
lograr
region in order to
vincularnos,
achieve
¿verdad? A
or
tanto
to
al
link
mercado
ourselves
digital
both to
interregional
the
como
intra-regional digital
global.
market and global
Un
digital
pequeño
market.
anuncio,
A
por favor, ahí
small
en el chat.
announcement, please, in
Nuestros
the
colegas de
chat. Our
Sempromipe
colleagues
han
from Sempromipe
incluido
have
el
included
enlace
a link,
y también se encuentra en nuestro centro
and
de recursos de
also
Sempromipe
it's on our
las
resource center
infografías que
Sempromipe, the
resumen los
infograph that
análisis de la
summarizes the
logística para
analysis of
facilitación del
logistics
comercio
for
electrónico en la
electronic
región
trade
que les
facilitation in the region.
invitamos
And we invite
a
you
descargar y a consultar. Y
to
en
download
función
and
del
consult,
tiempo,
and for
daríamos
reasons of time,
inicio
we will
al
start
último espacio de este
with the
día,
last
el
space
panel
for
Facilitación de
this
Comercio y
day, the panel
Logística para el
Trade
Comercio
Facilitation and
Digital.
Logistics for Digital
En
Trade.
esta sesión estaremos
During this
abordando el
session, we
tema
will
de
be
comercio
addressing
transfronterizo y logística,
transboundary
que se
trade and
percibe como uno de los
logistics, which is
principales
perceived
retos
as one
para el
of the
comercio
main challenges
electrónico
for
transfronterizo. Y para abordar
border
este tema se
e-trade,
revisarán las
transboundary
buenas prácticas de
e-trade, and
facilitación del
also to make
comercio y
good
la
practices
innovación de los
for
servicios
trade facilitation
logísticos
and
transfronterizos. Y nos
for
acompañan
transboundary
en
logistics
este
services. And
panel
we're
el
accompanied during
honorable
this
señor
panel,
secretario general
Honorable
de Integración
Secretary
Económica
General of
Centroamericana,
Economic
Francisco Lima
Integration for
Mena,
Central America, Mr.
también el
Francisco Lima
honorable
Mena,
señor
and also the
secretario general
Honorable
de la Unión
Secretary
Postal de
General
las
of the
Américas,
Postal Union
España
of
y
the
Portugal,
Americas, Spain and
Franklin Castro,
Portugal,
el distinguido
Mr. Alexis
representante del
Castro,
Banco Interamericano de
distinguished
Desarrollo,
representative of
señor
the
Jaime Granados, jefe de
the
la División
Bank
de
of
Comercio e
Central American
Inversión
Bank for
del BID,
Economic
y la
Development,
distinguida especialista
and
regional para comercio de las
the
agencias de los
specialist
Estados
for
Unidos para el
trade,
desarrollo
regional trade
internacional,
of USAID,
señora Lorena
Ms. Lorena
Aceto.
Aceto.
Y para moderar este
And
panel
to
nos
moderate this panel,
acompaña
we
Joan
are
Mulder,
accompanied by Joan
a quien
Mulder,
conocemos de cariño
whom
como
we
Nano,
know
quien cuenta con
as
amplia
Nano, who has
experiencia
broad
liderando
experience
los temas de
leading
comercio sostenible en
the
América Latina y
sustainable
Caribe.
trade
Nano
issues in
es
Latin
jefe de
America and Caribbean.
de
Nano
la
is head
Unidad de
of the
Comercio
unit
Sostenible
for
de la Comisión
sustainable
Económica para
trade
América
of the
Latina y el
Economic
Caribe,
Commission for Latin
CEPAL.
America
Sus
and the
principales
Caribbean,
temas de
ECLAC.
investigación y
Its
asistencia
main
técnica en la
researcher
actualidad
and
son
technical
cadenas
assistant
globales
topics
de
are
valor en
global value
general
chains in
y en
general
servicios
and
globales en
in
particular.
global
El
services in
e-commerce
particular,
transfronterizo y el comercio
transboundary
sostenible con
e-commerce
un
and
enfoque
sustainable trade
en
with
la
an approach
internacionalización de
on
pymes, brechas de
internationalization
género
of
y el cambio
MSME,
climático, entre
gender
otros temas globales.
gaps,
Damos
climate
la
change, and
bienvenida
other
para
global
moderar este
issues. We
espacio a Nano
welcome
Mulder.
Nano Mulder to be the moderator for this
Muchas
space.
gracias, Katia.
Thank you very much, Katia. I cannot open my camera. Maybe a technician could resolve this inconvenience to see if I can. There we have him. I would like to thank Katia and Sempromipe for this invitation and the panel members that will participate today. It's a great pleasure on behalf of ECLAC to moderate this panel, and we would like to thank all the information that we have reviewed with Sempromipe and ecosystem for electronic trade that we have dictated this year, and we expect to repeat this workshop for next year. As I mentioned, as this trade facilitation, thanking the colleagues from the couriers that were in the previous session about a vision from their part on trade facilitation. And in the second round about this topic, we will talk a bit more about the public sector vision of what should the governments from Central America do to facilitate transboundary flows of goods and what can be done. And for this purpose, we first have, as Katia mentioned, Honorable Mr. Secretary General of Economic Integration, Mr. Francisco Lima Mena, who is a secretary and has broad path and knows about the topics of Central American trade and also bilateral trade. Before assuming this General Secretariat of Economic Integration, Dr. Lima Mena worked as the main counsel of Central American Caribbean of Property Rights Office. He was also ambassador and permanent representative of El Salvador before the OMC and International Property Rights. He was also Deputy Director of Commercial and Adjunct Negotiator for Trade Negotiation of the Ministry of Economy of El Salvador. Secretary Lima is a lawyer and notary with a master's in international law. And next panelist is distinguished Jaime Granados, head of the division of the IDB. Jaime is in the bank since 1998, and he supervises the portfolio of trade integration in the region. Jaime has been professor for trade integration in the zone of the Americas and law he graduated in law from the Georgetown University. He's also had commercial relations from the Foreign Ministry of Costa Rica, and he has laws in Costa Rica and also has a master's in international law from the University of Georgia and a master's of public policies from the University of Oxford. He has published and edited several books and articles. Third panel member, we have Honorable Mr. Franklin Castro, with a large trajectory in the public sector and logistics and distribution networks, telecommunications, finances, and electronics, and he was in board of director positions in the government of El Salvador between 2019 2021. He was general director of the customs, the postal offices in El Salvador, vice minister of cooperation and minister. He has worked as a presenter on technology, trade facilitation, e-commerce. Currently, he resides in Uruguay and where is the head of the Postal Union for the Americas. And finally, we have the honor of receiving Mrs. Lorena Seto, who's a regional specialist for trade of the United States Agency for International Development. Since 2016, Lorena Seto is manager of trade facilitation projects that have been developed by USAID in the Central American region with an approach on trade facilitation of the Northern Triangle. Beforehand, Lorena was a specialist in access to markets and compliance of the CAFTA Treaty for the Department of Trade of the United States, and also specialist of promotion of Proeza of El Salvador. Ms. Aceto has a master's in international trade facilitation and social development and economic entrepreneurship of the SAT School of Madrid. And with this, I conclude with the introduction of our distinguished panel members, and I would like to open this round of interventions, starting with Mr. Secretary General of CIECA, and I would like to ask him the following question: what would be the main tools with which the system counts with it to facilitate the transboundary services of cargo within Central America? And if you could also clarify if there are facilities for the movement of small parcels linked to electronic trade. Mr. Lima Mena, Honorable Secretary General, you have 10 minutes for your answer. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased and happy to be sharing this panel with people who, besides I know them, we are friends from long ago. So we're going to complement, I'm absolutely sure. We have been working precisely on this topic in a coordinated manner, and the agencies represented here, the Inter-American Development Bank, uh, and the rest of the people who are sharing this. So I'm sure that we will be very well coordinated this afternoon. This is a topic that for 10 minutes clearly is a Guinness record if I'm able to explain more or less what we are doing in trade facilitation within the region. And let's say on the basis of the main tools, I would say, and I would focus my presentation in 3 or 4. First of all, the promotion and Central American strategy on trade facilitation, and which was been approved at the highest level in Central America by the presidents of the region, has a series of short, medium, and long-term measures. So I would like to talk a little bit about how much we have advanced on this and the different tools that have derived as a result of this. Number 2, what will be the putting into operation of the digital Central American trade platform known as PESC, and what has been the part of the Central American business networks that been administered by the Studies Center within the Secretariat. There are 3 large products or areas that we are working on, as I was saying, and in the Central American trade facilitation strategy, we have 5 priority short-term measures, 8 medium and long-term measures, and 3 are cross-cutting in the Central American trade facilitation strategy, which include within this cross-cutting axis the digital platform of Central America, the PESC, the strengthening of the national trade facilitation committees, and work by peers in trade facilitation at borders. And I refer specifically to the study and times of dispatch that were done with the methodology of the World Customs Organization, and that was handed over at the end of last year. The short-term measures of the Central American strategy, these measures identified as anticipated or transmission of sanitary certificates, the records of radio frequency devices, which are known as RGSC, and the use of camera systems and the border posts are 5 measures that are being implemented by an important number of countries within the region. And specifically, I would say, as regards to the integration process from the northern part of Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, the 5 measures are already totally implemented or fully implemented to the 5 short-term measures. Clearly, to have an anticipated declaration already operating in some uh, border posts has given it. We have economized times and procedures and border positions. It is very important. This is not a measure that would enter and see how it's going to work. This is a measure that is already being implemented and that is being used by some of the countries in an extremely effective way. We want to have a greater reach, which is what we have normally implemented, anticipated declarations in border posts of countries that are next to the other, such as Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, but we're in a process to launch anticipated declarations, even in countries that do not have a border, let's say El Salvador, Costa Rica, or Guatemala, Nicaragua. And we have this measure that has been very useful, and this is a clear example of what's being done. In the transmission of sanitary and sanitary certificates, this is a measure that is already being implemented or is implemented between Guatemala and Honduras. We have more than 8,000 transmissions of phyto and sanitary certificates in an electronic manner, and it's also shown that it is extremely useful and reduces times at the borders. We all know that the measures, phyto and sanitary measures are always delicate and sensitive measures by the countries, and therefore to have uh, an anticipated declaration of these certificates is a huge step in the Central American economic integration system. We also have what is referred to the records of radio frequency, and thanks to the generosity of some cooperating agency, among them USAID and Lorena has given us great support on this, and they're already working. However, I would say that it's somewhat limited. We have been talking with Lorena. I think that the scope and the potentiality of the RFIDs go further than just measuring time. And Lorena will acknowledge that we took the RFID model of the border posts of Mexico. What we want to do is bring it to that phase, bordering points duly controlled through radio frequency. These are ID systems that are not expensive systems. They are not too invasive, and that really help to facilitate trade within the region. Certainly, the usage of camera systems in the border points has helped for us to be able to anticipate. We have been able to anticipate or to correct certain bottlenecks in the border points, as could be the case of Achadura. This is the Central American border that has a series of very important limitations, but as I said, that the part of the RFIDs and the installation of cameras, we have had great cooperation on the part of USAID and without a doubt on the part of the Inter-American Development Bank. Regarding medium-term progress or advance, we could say that we have already come about, particularly in the construction of the economic authorities, uh, which is part of the package is going to be implemented, and trade facilitation is already working in some countries in a satisfactory manner. Here, the challenge is to finish to complete the regional base of these authorized officials, and the expedite mechanisms that should be strengthened so that the economic authorized operators have these advantages and could be certified as such. Regarding infrastructure and equipment, we have also worked a lot to improve the infrastructure in different bordering points. We've had a lot of cooperation from donors, and at the same time, this has been transferred to countries like Nicaragua, and all of the profound integration system, at least in the northern part of Central America, has received great benefits of this topic with regards to the strengthening on equipping and infrastructure. And we have had border point strengthening, which mark a before and after posts that were quite simple and are now extremely advanced and modern, that not only includes bordering posts, but also the uh, housing modules and those border points. These are integrated bordering points, and clearly the procedure time and these positions went from hours to between 6 to 8 minutes. So under this profound integration model, the investment in the infrastructure clearly makes a difference to speed up trade. And this is what, in the end, is what it's all about. We're trying to advance a lot on measure 8 of the medium term, referring to border communities and security. This is the part of the social impact that these modern customs, this modern integrated custom generate a certain displacement of some commercial traditional economies which had occurred throughout time, and when the border um, passing is speedier, many businesses next to the border position, let's say sale of goods, and the social impact is something that we need to reformulate and reorient and support to these social communities that certainly are important. This is regarding the facilitation part with regard to the radio frequency. A lot has been done to the Central American trade platform. Once it enters into operation, it will have trade facilitation through digitalization of services for national authorities from each one of the Central American countries, including 6 Central American countries. I refer to immigration, customs, agriculture, and the single export windows. SECA becomes uh, in a intra-regional node that transmits everything that refers to anticipated declarations, and they're already transmitting in the profound integration process, the fiducas and the PICs. And this service is something that would start operating once the IT developments enter into operation, and then fill the database on the part of the country so that the interoperability of these systems between systems can start to operate and to work. This will really mark a before and after in the digitalization offer of Central America to speed up trade, interregional trade, and I think this is the letter of presentation most profound uh, presentation card for Central America. We talk about trade facility, we can talk about a series of issues, but in the concrete case of Central America, it is getting a lot to the issue of digitalization of services, and this is a bit about what we're doing on the uh, FSIC and virtual rounds. Finally, this is a platform in order to facilitate a business roundtables. We have business of nearly 26,000 Central American businesses registered, and that we have the intention or business intention for several $1 million already established within the Central American network. Business roundtables, we're going to make an upgrade so that these can also be virtual exhibitions or fairs as a part of the product that were very strengthened as a result of the windows of opportunities that were presented by as a result of the pandemic. And I think COVID-19, although it generated many problems and much destruction, I think it also taught us to attract business in a more efficient manner through the different platforms. And this is what has allowed that this becomes strengthened. Regarding the forum, I would like to end by saying, because I have just touched them, but like a bit of the information, that to say that from my position since I arrived, I'm fully committed and convinced that a lot of what we have to do needs to be concentrated in support to the MSME. For one fundamental reason, more than 97% of the Central American entrepreneurial fabric is MSME, and therefore the exception should be those that are not MSME, and therefore a lot of what we do within the Secretariat is going to make sense only and when if this is accessible to these micro, small, and medium enterprises. Central American trade, the second most important partner of Central America is Central America. And of the intra-regional trade only, we're using the potential of 25%. In other words, we have 75% of intra-regional trade that still has capacity and great potential of being exploited. However, the dreams and those large companies to get to US markets or European markets or Asian markets, I think we have a window of opportunity that is extremely valuable within the region to go more in depth of the work that will facilitate the intra-regional trade. And this is what the SIC is, because this is a platform designed to support intra-regional trade in this phase. However, it has the potential to strengthen or promote trade uh, further from the Central American region. I would stay here. Maybe you have more concrete questions, and as I say, to make a summary in 10 minutes of such an extensive topic, if I am able to do that one day, I'm going to appear in the Guinness Book of Records. So thank you very much for the space. I think you have done excellent job to summarize the very impressive Central American agenda for trade facilitation with these 5 short-term actions and the measures at the medium term. And also I like the expression that CIECA makes projects to facilitate all of the customs processes and of other nature that are important for regional trade. And I think it's important to remember that Central America is already the region that is the most integrated of Latin America and the Caribbean, with 50% of the exports that go to the sub-region, without a doubt, with the measures that have been implemented and with the business work groups or roundtables in the near future. Now we will go to the second panel member. Jaime, you have ample experience on trade facilitation in Latin America. It's also important to remember the challenges that exist in a general manner for trade facilitation are even bigger in view of faster movement of cargo and larger volumes of shipments that have to be displaced between airports and borders, and even sometimes when distances are short. And so what is, from your experience and perspective, what are the main challenges in trade facilitation in Latin America, and more specifically for Central America, that could talk about transboundary trade? 10 minutes, please, Jaime.
Thank you very much, Nano. I have put my timer on. It's a pleasure to be here with you. It's a pleasure to greet my panel members. It's pertinent to talk about the challenges of e-commerce in Central America. And I'm going to focus on Central America this time, based on the premise that e-commerce is one of the most progressive measures that we could promote, because it has a particular high impact and disproportionately important for SMEs, as it was said by the General Secretary Lima, who talked before me, and also because it has an impact on women and everywhere around the world, and not only because of the need arising from the pandemic to be supported by e-commerce. Also, China has a whole policy in terms of benefiting from all the development of this and the democratization of all these opportunities. So I'd like to talk about 5 important topics, and I'm going to summarize them to see how we can potentiate everything regarding e-commerce. And I talk about cross-border e-commerce, not necessarily the internal or national e-commerce that requires another type of analysis, maybe similar but different to the trans or cross-border e-commerce. I'd like to mention first the first challenge, which is banking. If people don't have access to bank account, probably they are not going to benefit from e-commerce. And this is particularly critical in Central America, where banking access is very low. And if we take into account the percentages of banking access in Costa Rica, there's 68%, Nicaragua 26% banking access from the population. The rest of the countries are somewhere in between. So we need to close that banking access gap to promote e-commerce. The second important topic is the internet penetration rate, because if there's no internet, there's no e-commerce. In some countries, it is a human right already, and in fact, there is still an important internet penetration gap. So here again, in Central America, we have differences. In Costa Rica, we have 82% internet penetration, that is percentage of the population that has access to internet, and then we have Honduras with 42% access to internet. It means to close those internet penetration rates is the second challenge that we need to work on. We need to have investments in infrastructure, in telematics to that purpose, so that there is internet access to the majority of the population to use the potentials of e-commerce. The third big topic that I'd like to mention is the regulatory framework. We all know that e-commerce and the suppliers of banking services, internet services, as well as sellers of goods and services are companies that require an environment of businesses and a legal framework that is safe. That is why to promote this to the benefit of the e-commerce in Central America is very important. And I'm talking here about disciplines such as privacy, servers, location, security, digital signatures, digital payments, and it has been approach these topics in Central America. We can compare how this is done in different countries. We have Honduras, who has a law for e-commerce that can be applauded, and other countries that have just addressed the topic of digital payments and other recognition of digital signatures and things like that. So there's a whole lack of harmonization, legally talking, to promote effectively the progress of e-commerce. That means to say that at the regional level, it can be interpreted adequately, given the multilaterality of the CAFTA agreement chapters, where it has a digital commerce chapter, which is regulated for Central America, but that chapter is so short and so vague that it needs to be modernized. This has been signed by Chile, New Zealand, Singapore, also the electronic chapter of the new NAFTA, which is the TAMEC, to create a new discipline for e-commerce. I leave it there. And the fourth topic is about promoting the capacity of SMEs so that they jump into the cross-border e-commerce train, so to say, promoting their capacities with the help of us cooperative agencies, and take a look at the progress made. As it was being said, SMEs have to have their training methods so that they can make use of this. We have been using this through Connect America's implementation for SMEs, which has important quantity of contents, instructions that SMEs can make use of, precisely to make use of the e-commerce trend. So please go to connectamericas.com and enter the training modules where you will find the courses, free courses in Spanish and in English to the purpose of training and making and benefiting from the SMEs internationalization of the SMEs. And this is important that we continue working in that direction. And the fifth topic has to do with the facilitation of e-commerce. And it has been mentioned already how we have been supporting and funding from the bank's perspective these disciplines that are a lot of disciplines that facilitate the e-commerce. And I'd like to mention two of them. One is the foreign trade window. They have been improved and being modernized, but there's also different things like, for example, in Central America, Honduras has not made that progress. There are other countries who have made an important progress in that. There are some countries where they still need 2% of automatization. That means that the single window provides authorizations in the case when the information provides the information required, all the data is informed. So automatically in 98%, this creates automatized response. And this we are working on so that this becomes 100% coverage. And we also need to close the gap on single windows. These are not the only channels where e-commerce takes place, but also the post offices. There is a need to harmonize the treatment of all of these entities and players. Let's remember that lots of packages enter a country without any sanitary requirements, and this is what we're doing from the bank in supporting the foreign trade single windows and also the post offices so that they are able to have control those type of risks that imply many times that the small packages are not going through strict controls. I'm talking here about medicines and other merchandise like that. So in terms of risk in this regard, the single windows are important. And we have been doing some pilot projects like in Chile, in Uruguay, where we are open to consider all other countries to work and implement this type of projects. So it is important to work on those gaps in terms of customs, e-commerce, and precisely with the important or big companies, packaging or transport packaging companies. It is important to help close those gaps, communication gaps among these, so that we can provide important support to the e-commerce. So I have now come to my 10 minutes talking. I would like to extend myself further. Thank you, Jaime, for this broad vision that you gave us about the facilitation of trade and risk management. I'd also like to mention that e-commerce in Central America, you have given facts for it to grow that have to do with internet connection, regulations, and also the capacity of the companies where the region of the Americas is important to know the export capacity and the growth of exporting companies in the region and across borders. We will now continue with our next panelist. It's Lorena Seto, as well as Jaime. She's a specialist in foreign trade and from the USAID Institution for International Development. And I'd like to ask you, Lorena, on the type of project that you have implemented with Sempromipe. Could you please tell us which are the limitations in Central America to promote cross-border e-commerce, and most of all in regard to trade facilitation. And I refer here to topic like authorized economic operator and risk management that Jaime mentioned very briefly, also transparencies and the processes, and also standardization of the norms or guidelines. 10 minutes for you, Lorena. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to be putting my timer on so that I can talk in 10 minutes. I hope that I can cover the topic, and I'm going to concentrate on risk management. I'm not a customs person, but I consider that there cannot be facilitation of trade if there's no risk management, no true risk management. And when I talk about that, I'm not referring to customs risk management, because we always talk about risk management and we talk about customs, but really in foreign trade, it's not only about customs. We also have ministries of agriculture. We also have ministry of health. We also have other entities that deal with anti-narcotics, anti-drug activities, and all of them are involved in international trade. So what happens when these small companies come to customs? Now that with e-commerce, let's say there is a small package arriving, how will you coordinate all this package world? There are thousands of packages arriving. How can we coordinate all these entities so that they inspect each package? We have always seen risk management to inspect big containers, but now with e-commerce, this is even more preponderant, the efforts that all these agencies need to do. So I would start by saying that the first thing that we need to do to facilitate trade and commerce is to coordinate all the control agencies that are involved in foreign trade, all of them, not only customs, it's all of the agencies. So starting from that coordination effort. See, something very interesting I heard during the first panel, it was Maria Fernanda who talked about confidence and trust, how to develop confidence. It's not only between the private or public sector, it's also confidence between the different agencies that need to share information. Jaime was talking about the single window. If we don't share information within the different control agencies, and if we don't share information with the private sector, or the private sector doesn't share information, the same with prior declarations and all, in that case, single windows are not going to work well. So digitalization is very good, and you need to work with that. But before that, you need to coordinate all the efforts, coordinate all the processes that each one of them has, because each one of them has specific controls that you need to consider when you develop a whole digitalization process, so that you can later have this interoperativization between the different institutions. So once we have developed trust and agencies are coordinated, then we can see the process. We can incorporate into this single window, or they will themselves take a look at the electronic systems. They will put them in their single window, and now we can think of talking about the prior declaration or anticipated declaration. And this declaration has to be mandatory on the long term, because if it's not mandatory for the private sector, then they are not going to do so. When we only leave it to their criteria, they are not going to do that. And I agree, Jaime, that it is necessary to develop this. And there comes the need of having internet access. Everyone has to have internet access. Everyone has to have access to Wi-Fi in order to have a prior declaration or anticipated declaration made. So, but once this is possible, it needs to be mandatory too. And we also talked about confidence about the risk system with all the control agencies. And here comes a little the aspect about the authorized economic agent, OEA in Spanish. There has to be a process. We need to see how we can simplify those requirements so that also SMEs can compete and can become trustable operators that can be authorized as operators, and as you were mentioning, to be able to select those small enterprises or small companies that I will concentrate on to make my inspections, or those that I will allow to free their packages. So I know that there's a lot of focus on the part of imports, and it's important, but it's also crucial in regard to imports. They mentioned it on the first panel. Many of these SMEs, they need to bring their materials. They will produce with materials that come from abroad. So the expedite process has to be quick for importing or for exporting. So once you have the controls, once you have the interoperabilization, then we can teach the companies. We were talking about training of the companies. How can we train all the companies so that they fulfill international requirements, international trade requirements, because many of them don't know them. And I have written down, Jaime, all those trainings online that are taking place, because it's really necessary to continue with these trainings, but you need to disseminate this information. And I want to talk too much. There are efforts being done at this moment. I'd like to comment on them because there are really efforts. We were talking about the interoperativization of some different control agencies. As you said, we're working already, for example, in Honduras, so that they can operate and jointly inspect together with the Ministry of Agriculture. They go to customs. And I hope that this process can be replicated in other countries, and not only at the internal level of every country. We need to talk here about interoperativization between the different countries and come to an agreement, as it has been achieved with what the General Secretary mentioned, which is a deep integration. There are already important efforts being done for that interoperativization, because, for example, it is also possible to have a phytosanitary permit. There is this joint control already existing. So you also need to see what happens when you arrive to the border. You need that I like to talk about, and I'm not going to talk about the regulations because they were mentioned already by Jaime. There are still some others to be established, like the simplification of processes. And again, it's not only about that, it's also about simplifying product registries, the harmonization of sanitary registries. Through the technical regulations in Central America, we have some, but they still are very general. And I'd like to close with something very important, which is that in Central America, all the countries, we would need to make an effort so that the small SMEs companies have access to one only access point, information access of what they need. What do they need to import and what do they need to import? The poor companies, if you don't know what you need, you don't know where to look for it. So each Ministry of Health has its own information, custom has its information. But if I am a company that is going to export chocolate, for example, I don't know if it needs a sanitary permit. I don't know. I would need to have one access point where they tell me all that. And there is when we go back to the regional single window. or as Secretary Lima was saying, it would have to be Central America. SECA would need to be like a point that concentrates all these processes so that the small SMEs companies can have access to this information in one and only point and make their lives easier. So I will remain with that. I will stop there. And thank you for being here with this team, as Secretary Lima said, with friends and with Jaime, with whom we have been working since a long time ago, several years. Just exactly within time, the alarm has sounded. Thank you, Lorena, for your very interesting contribution in terms of risk management, also not only to the inside of the countries, but between the countries. And you finish with some important idea, which is the key role that SIECA can play with a single window for the region. But this would only work if there's the integration and coordination of the systems, and if they are dealt with at the national level before going to the supranational level, SIECA level. So now we will go with our fourth member of the panel. We have heard that about logistics services. They are key elements, and the countries have infrastructure of the national post offices that provide services for delivering packages internationally and national e-commerce also, which is without any doubt a strategic agent in the ecosystem for e-commerce. And I believe it is more important, considering that these are precisely the situations where they are able to reach every corner in the country, because big courier companies, sometimes they operate more in paracentral zones, and also post offices, they offer facilities or processes for companies or for bigger companies too. So in this context, I'd like to ask our speaker, Franklin, how could the post offices in Central America strengthen themselves so that they can offer a better service and the last mile service, so to say, and to facilitate e-commerce for consumers as well as for SMEs. And in this context, could you mention some examples of concrete actions along this line in the countries of the region? And obviously, we will be interested to know if there is a Central American agenda for post offices in this region. Please, Franklin. Thank you, Johan. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Good afternoon, good evening. It's really important for us from the General Secretary of Postal Offices and Maritime Offices to have a participation. So thanks to Sempromipe for the invitation. We think that the national post offices operators play an important role in the delivering of the extra mile, so to say. As I was saying, the National Post Office lies on the authority of the universal post offices, where precisely they can carry and deliver to the last point. They can reach points where other companies may not be able to do so. And of course, this implies higher costs, but they are so by mandate. So we can say that part of the strength that National Post Office have is that they can reach every place in a country. And that is the reason why it's important to have this network to be used not only for postal services, but also for financial inclusion services. That's why services can be diversified. And if post offices can diversify their services, they will going to have more income. On the other side, governments need to place an importance on this, because many governments are not potentiating the local post offices. They have being used only for small packages, but it's also being used for the digitalization of government products, like, for example, certifications of from, let's say, birth certificates. All this paperwork can be done online, and people receive that just by making click. And this helps a lot because this is the digitalization, and this is another source of income. So from the General Secretariat of it, we are betting on strengthening the postal offices, and part of this bet is that the platform has been developed. E-commerce is it's the name, and this is for the postal offices so that they can develop e-commerce in their countries. This platform is available, and we have it available for the countries in Central America for it to be used. El Salvador won't be using it because it already has a platform, but the other countries in the region, I have also talked about it with Nicaragua and also the rest. Costa Rica, for example, has a very advanced e-commerce. And the advantage is, as another panelist said, is that people have access to banking. But there are also certain elements that can be developed for people who don't have banking access, because really it's a problem not to have a credit card to process some purchases. But through these platforms, you can do this with a gift card or other types of cards where you can go to a postal office and buy the card to start using that card for buying. And this is important because the export of these products can generate, first, coming closer from the nationals that produce nostalgic products and want to export. In this way, they are potentiating their economies. So e-commerce platform is available for all the countries in the region. You just need to contact us if you would like to use this. We have launched that in Madrid already, a forum that we had in July. And there are some countries that have come close to us, Venezuela, Bolivia, also Mexico, probably contacting to have this platform and use it. We need to say that the post office need to be strengthened in not only in digitalization, but also in their operational processes. It's important to say that there is a need to make a whole review, because the customer needs a service, and it has to be quick. For example, e-commerce purchase has to have a quick delivery. That is why we have to be prepared, logistically talking, to operate and do this last mile and operate with quality and security. We have to mention that the post office has already a system which is an anticipated customs declaration, which is a system used by the post offices that is a tool that facilitates the custom processes, where you know what is going to be arriving in packages. And post office have strengths because postal processes are different than customs, and this is an advantage and competitive advantages, because the processes are quicker, because they are considered postal cargo and not goods cargo. Lots of cargo is different now, because the people, what they used to do is that they went to a post office and they sent it, and now they buy online, and the company sends the package. So this has changed, and that's why regulations need to go in that direction. Also, from the General Secretariat, we have several plans for regulatory aspects, providing technical support to those countries who so wish. And for example, Honduras, I'd like to congratulate on behalf, because of a couple of days ago, they requested us through a letter that they want to be part of the a comprehensive postal office plan, because it's a whole review of the postal office topic, and there we have everything that deals with permits, sanitary permits, and all of that. So to be able to prepare regulations and a whole plan that consider all the points, and to export all the products and as well as imports. We also need to say and mention certain projects that have been carried out successfully. We have Exporta Fácil, which is in Brazil, which is a program that we have available to the countries that need or want to implement it. And also the General Secretary worked on a manual for the facilitation of commerce that has all the information for an operator, appointed operator, and entities, so that they have a facility to do import and export in an easy and quicker way. So part of the experiences that the region can give of SEU, El Salvador, and the e-commerce platform that we have in place, and the manual that we have also for post offices, for those governments that require. So all that helps working on the imports and exports. We are here at the Secretariat to support you in every sense. So this is where I'm going to finish, and as you have, the mics are open for every question if you like.
Thank you very much, Franklin, for all this panorama of how the National Post Office should transform to avoid them to die. And then there's a context that will change completely, as you emphasized, that you have the e-commerce and the trade facilitation manual and the support that you offer with regards to the comprehensive development plan and an ecosystem for e-commerce for the postal offices as main actors and who would like to transform to adjust to the new times. And I think these are very big challenges for most of the Central American countries, not only for them, but also for the Latin American postal offices. And we thank you very much for your support in this process. And as you well say, this refers that all of the ecosystem will be put into operation for those changes. As because of time, we are 10 minutes after the other, but we also started a bit late. I would like to give way to a question that was in the chat, and afterwards I would like to give the floor to each one of the panel members for a final word for this panel. So the question that there was on the part of Alice Mejia, somebody would like to respond to this question. The question is, why not propose the globalization of financial institutions that have grown enormously and have services that facilitate forms of payment with the purpose of growing? Anybody would like to respond to this question? Can you please repeat the question to see if we can dare to answer this one? I will read the question, why not propose a cooperation of the financial institutions that have grown enormously and have services that facilitate forms of payment with the purpose of growing? So in what way can the cooperation of the financial institutions could be a mechanism to promote and support electronic e-trade?
Es una pregunta muy compleja realmente.
This is a very complex question, and it steps outside of the context that we are addressing at this time. I think Secretary Lima would like to speak, and I'm going to give my opinion for a minute, and then Johan, you can give the floor to him, or if you wish, Ms. Secretary Lima, then you can speak first, and Johan, or whatever you say. Secretary Lima, please go ahead, because for time constraints, more than focusing on why not do a determined thing to facilitate something, I think what I could say is that much of e-trade, the exchange of merchandise in the Central American region around the world has been seen greatly facilitated because of the systems, payment system that there is. We have platforms for credit cards and others. I could say that the payment method doesn't necessarily at this time, it's not necessarily the challenge at this time to be overcome to increase or improve exchange of goods in an expedite manner. What I could say, and maybe that's not necessarily the question, is that when we talk about facilitating urgent shipments or low-cost shipments within the region, which is a discussion that we're having with custom directors, there was a criteria that is important at this time. And I'm talking about real time to bring this discussion to facilitate the risk management process platform is a bit the criteria of tax collection, and it operates in each one of the Central American countries in a different way. What do I refer to? What I want to say here, in the case of a country, it could be that all shipment of merchandise below $300 and not in a repeated manner constitutes a shipment that is not going to be subject to great controls or customs fees or VATs. There's another criteria that says all shipment as of zero upwards is going to be have a fee. This is tied to these fiscal pressures that at this time some countries of the region have to attend all these sanitary type of needs or package of foods, etc. And here, the base argument at this time, which regionally is with detaining the discussion, is to convince ourselves of the good or the bad of the many. It's a collection element or the fiscal sacrifice that will be faced by each one of the countries. As I say, some take out the assessment that they're going to collect this less tax, but they're going to collect more IVA or VAT. And but others say that I want to collect this fee and I also want to collect VAT. So I would like to collect taxes to the maximum. This is what is occurring at this time, and we're trying to work on or advance on these talks and express shipments, etc. And that we hope to be able to reach a good conclusion. Thank you very much, Secretary Lima. Now, Franklin, you also wanted to respond to that question. Of course. To answer that question, although it's outside of the context that we're talking about, and I say the context because we're talking of cooperative financial issues, the question is well focused in the sense that this could become at some point in time in the countries where there is not that much of financial or banking development for individuals in a barrier to be able to buy in e-commerce. However, the disparity in Central America of financial inclusion is, I would say, very strange because we have countries, as Jaime Granados was saying, Costa Rica, that have an 82% of financial inclusion, people that are banked, with other countries like Nicaragua, who has a low index, or Honduras of banking. And if we see it from the point of view of the consumer, it's a barrier because they cannot access to these types of products. And what this does is generate concentrators of people who are acquiring wholesale products online, and they are reselling the products in the countries where they live in. There's different ways of doing it in El Salvador. They create the law for financial facilitation and have new opportunities for the unbanked people in the sense that the simplified accounts, where there's a great facility to be able to obtain a simplified bank account or the e-wallets to be used for the system of payments. There's also facility in Honduras. They created a certain regulation for the e-wallets, and Costa Rica. It's a great example of the banking and the payment system, which are very important. I think it's appropriate from the Central American point of view that they could strengthen the financial system, because being new payment options or new slight fast banking that could give this facility. But the most profound topic is these payment gateways and the large players such as Visa and MasterCard, among others, which have certain parameters and requirements to be able to accept new institutions to be able to issue these plastics. Therefore, it's a very profound topic, which I think the governments should pay more interest to. And if there's interest from certain governments that have given this cruise, but there's a lot to be talked on this topic. And definitely, I think that financial inclusion and bankarization, and not necessarily bankarization, needs to help to generate this ecosystem, because financial inclusion brings great benefits, not only in e-commerce, but in other uh, payment facilitation, which saves time and saves economy and the money area. And so I think something is being done. They started, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. And when they make a union of cooperatives, for this they need a very strong regulatory framework. And I don't think that any country in the region should have the conditions to get together with the cooperatives, and not only the cooperatives, but also the markets that would have accept these type of things. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's another challenge so that the governments can continue to work on the same. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Franklin, for this very complete answer, and Secretary Lima, very complimentary to your points of view. We are about to close this last panel of the day, and I would like to ask each one of the panel members a very brief final comment with regards to an element that they consider absolutely fundamental from here towards the future in trade facilitation, to precisely ensure that Central America, and similar to the rest of Latin America, is not only a consumer of e-commerce, but also becomes an actor, an exporter, and so that the small and medium enterprise could make use eventually of this new mechanism of international trade for their sales, international sales. So let's start with Secretary Lima, please. 1 minute. Thank you. I would concentrate a bit on the perspective of trade facilitation. We have to advance on the regional level so that we can provoke a new ecosystem that would help to trade exchange within the region. For this, we have to work very strongly on the trade facilitation strategy, with emphasis on the coordination work of borders, and launch a new revision of this facilitation platform that is already considered in order to update it because of the new challenges that we have. On the other hand, we should also work on an element that is also classified, which is the study of dispatch times, which is another challenge, and which a couple of borders were being faced in the Central American borders, and the flow of trade that would transit maybe not so accelerated. I think it's important also to be very usual that the commitments that the Central Americans adopt with e-trade, and therefore, in accordance to our commitments, is something very important. I think the Central American region has done excellent work in this sense, and I think there is a need to go more in depth on this. We have started, and we're very pleased that we launched the Central American Committee that includes all of the trade facilitation entities of the Central American region, and the input that can come out of this will be extremely important in order to uh, attend the real needs, the current needs, uh, in view of all the challenges that the national committees have and that are seen in this regional committee. And so I think the coordinated management is extremely important, and to continue promoting it from this perspective, holistic perspective, is the correct way to attend what will be necessary for our MSMEs. As I say, are 97% of our entrepreneurial fabric. Thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary Lima. Now, Jaime Granados, please a minute. Thank you again. First of all, I would like to validate that all my predecessor points mentioned. I totally agree. Secondly, I would also like to communicate that for me, there is no relation between the operativization and the effectiveness with which the banks can manage e-trade in a more effective way. I don't know why to operativize the banks, and I would like to analyze or indicate no time for analysis, something that we haven't talked about, which is so rich and potentially more than e-trade of merchandise, and I say e-trade of services, for which Central America can do a big contribution. Remember that services based on knowledge, particularly aimed at export, has an enormous capacity to generate employment and to generate added value and to attract foreign currency to the countries, etc. In order to promote e-commerce on services is as important to facilitate a trade of merchandise and goods, digital contents, media, publicities, professional services, BPO, outsourcing of all sorts, which we are already doing very aggressively in Central America, is also e-trade, and we have to promote it in the same way. So I leave this there on the table. Thank you all. Thank you, Jaime, for these messages and for highlight the importance of international service trade delivered through digital means that also have a great potential of growth, where without a doubt it's very important to have it in the Central American agenda to promote these activities. Lorena Aceto, last minute, please. Thank you all. Thank you, Nano. Thank you all. Thank you, Jaime. I also add to the comments from Secretary Lima, particularly in coordinated management of borders. I would add to that coordinated management of borders the coordination with the private sector to generate even more trust. And this can be done through the national trade facilitation committees. I know this is being done regionally, and to have this regional trade facilitation committees would also contribute to consolidate these joint efforts that trust between both sectors that cannot be separated or act separately. And with this, I would like to conclude and thank you very much for having allowed me to participate in this magnificent panel. Thank you, Lorena. And I think the Central American Trade Facilitation Committee can play an important role, and this holistic vision that is required for e-trade. Last but not least, Franklin Castro, also a minute, please. From the General Secretariat of the Postal Union of Latin America, Spain, and Portugal, and some countries of the Caribbean, we are to give technical support and technical cooperation, because we also give cooperations that the countries and the customs of the postal offices can give a support, which is very important to strengthen and have synergies within the e-commerce market in order to have better revenues and have the customer satisfaction. As regards to quality, I only have to reiterate that we're at your service, particularly the Central American countries, to be able to provide the e-commerce platform that will become great players. There's a platform, it's at your service. All you have to do is request it to be able to use it. And thank this great panel of speakers that is really important, people with great experience. I congratulate Mr. Lima precisely because of everything that's being done at CIECA. Jaime Granados, your participation was excellent, particularly for financial inclusion, and I agree that you do not need to operativize the banks. This is ready and done, and it needs to work, and Lorena very certain with the levels of risk which need to be integrated to be able to have a better holistic administration, as Mr. Lindman was saying, of all of the ecosystems that need to work for the well-being of the end consumers, so that the companies such as the postal offices be sources to produce money and not only be subsidized by the governments to survive. Thank you for everything. I wish you a great evening. Johan, great moderator. I congratulate you. Thank you. Thank you, Franklin. I think with this, you made an excellent summary of the whole panel. So now I turn this back to of this event to send Promipe and thank all the panel members and all of the persons who stayed until the end for the session. Thank you very much and good afternoon, evening, and rest of the week. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to each and every one of our representatives and regional stakeholders, CIECA, the Postal Services, USAID, and a special thanks for the persons from ECLAC and this space and this trade facilitation for e-commerce. And we thank each and everyone for your active participation. A warm greeting to everyone who has sent greetings and have been seeing our different channels. And we have received greetings from Cuba, Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala. And special appreciation to the Department of States of the United States that made it possible to carry out this high-level forum. With this, we close our first day of trade facilitation of logistics. And today we have gone through all sorts of data of Central American import-export to see these basic conversation panels of global and regional experts. We were able to go in depth of trade facilitation topics and logistics for digital trade that we need to promote for MSMEs for the Sika region. What can we expect for tomorrow? Tomorrow we will be talking about the support infrastructure that electronic e-commerce needs to be able to be taken up by the Sika region MSME. Thank you very much for your active participation, and we'll see you tomorrow on the same link at 2 p.m. Central American time. Great afternoon and great evening for each and every one of you.